Chapter 265. On the first day of the 6th month, the tightly shut city gates of Ji County finally opened. 2,000 Dawei soldiers were the first to enter the city and surrender to the Yudo soldiers. After the death of Guide Lieutenant General Yan He, the remaining Yan family army was like a sheet of loose sand. They were unable to deal with the attacks launched by the Yudo. Now that they had lost and had no reinforcements, it was only a matter of time before they surrendered. The Yudo did not suspect anything. The Yudo soldiers on both sides of the city gates all held their blades and mocked the weakness of the Dawei soldiers. Hien was hiding in the ranks of the Dawei soldiers. Her face was covered in dust and her original appearance could not be seen. She was mixed in with the troops. These 2,000 people were all personally selected by Hien. The majority of them were from the Fuyua army. There was no other reason. She had not gotten used to the Yan family army yet. The Fuyua army had fought alongside her for a period of time, and had a tacit understanding. This time, entering the city would be very dangerous. Nothing could go wrong. After Yan He's death, the only person who had a say in the Yan family army was his lieutenant, Chen Cheng. At the end of the road, Yudo General Sha Jite saw Chen Cheng walk forward and laughed. "Dawei is a coward. That's all there is to it." Chen Cheng lowered his head and asked, "If my army surrenders to the Yudo, can you let my soldiers live?" Of course, of course. Sha Jite was very muscular and mocked. "Since you have surrendered to the Yudo, from now on, you are the Yudo. We will not attack our own people." "Then, Sir Sha Jite, please open the city gates and accept Dawei's surrender," Chen Cheng replied. Sha Jite's eyes flashed. "Opening the city gates is a small matter. However, the surrendered soldiers must be like you." He pointed at the troops. "Put down their weapons and tie their hands. That is the only way." He still did not trust Dawei. Chen Cheng said, "That is not a problem." He said, "Please allow me to send someone back to explain this matter." Sagat. "All right." Chen Cheng walked to the side of a soldier and whispered a few words into his ear. The soldier nodded and turned to walk towards the city gate. Halfway through, a Yudo standing at the side suddenly knocked an arrow and shot it through the chest of the soldier, who went back to pass the order. The soldier didn't even have time to cry out before he fell to the ground and stopped moving. Chen Cheng was furious. "What's going on? Didn't you tell him to go back and pass on the order? You're all captives now. How dare you raise conditions with us?" The Yudo who was holding his bow said with disdain, "If you spout any more nonsense, I'll kill you as well." Sharjit smiled and said, "Why are you angry? He's just an ordinary soldier. Can't you just send another person?" Their attitude was clearly to provoke Dawei's soldiers. Ian knew that something was wrong. Before he could say anything, a soldier from the Yen family charged towards the Yudo in front of him and shouted, "I'd rather die than be humiliated. Let's fight them to the death." Yen sighed in his heart. The style of a general would affect the actions of the entire army. He was direct and courageous, and the soldiers under him were the same. They could not be provoked. Now, all their previous preparations were useless. But so what? The soldiers in front of him had already exchanged blows with the Yudo. Before they entered the city, they had already taken off their weapons. Now they could only snatch the blades from the enemy's hands with their bare hands. It was tragic and dangerous. Hien kicked away the Yudo that was charging towards him, and snatched the long blade from his hand. He shouted, "Boys, follow me." On the battlefield outside Yunzi City, the Golden Cavalry was covered in blood. The Yudo soldiers outside the city were beaten until they covered their heads and ran away like rats. The reason why the Killer General was called the Killer General, the 9 Flags Battalion, was called the 9 Flags Battalion, and the Nanfu soldiers were called the Nanfu soldiers, because those who had fought with them had mostly died on the battlefield. Bystanders could only hear from the mouths of those who had escaped with their lives that this army was invincible. But when they actually faced them on the battlefield, they would know that the rumors were not even 1/10 of their strength. Among the thousands of soldiers and horses, the black-armored youth with a long sword was like an emissary from hell. His sword was as cold and indifferent as his gaze. His jade-like appearance brought with it endless killing intent. And he wasn't fighting alone. The cavalry behind him was like his shield, but also like his spear, making this army seem invincible and intimidating at first glance. The soldiers of one person were like wolves and tigers, like wind and rain, like thunder and lightning. They shook the world and shocked the world. This was a crucial battle, and also the final battle to besiege the city. As long as they won this battle, they would be able to take back Yunzi. The rest was just to clean up the mess. But for this battle, Xiaoju and the Nanfu soldiers had been waiting for a long time. The Yudo and Yunzi were not willing to open the city gates to face the Nanfu soldiers. They were afraid of the reputation of the Nanfu soldiers and the Nine Flags Battalion. They still had reserves in the city of Yunzi, but the Great Way soldiers and horses stationed outside the city would run out of rations one day. Xiaoju ordered people to carry rations outside the city every day. He purposely let the Yudo who came to investigate in secret see him. 1 or 2 days was fine, but after a long time, the Yudo would also become suspicious. Seeing that the Dawei soldiers had sufficient rations and high morale, they could not help but be alarmed and fearful. But that was not all. Long before coming to Yunzi, Xiaoju had already arranged for a few skilled craftsmen in the South House army to follow them. After arriving at Yunzi, he sent the army and the craftsmen to secretly dig a tunnel that led to Yunzi city. He also ordered people to use crossbows to shoot stone arrows into the city to harass the Yudo. After a long time, the Yudo were on tenterhooks. Even though their leader ordered them not to leave the city, their morale was shaken. The battle of wits between generals was sometimes just a competition of who could keep their cool. Whoever could not keep their cool first would lose. The Yudo that occupied Yunzi fell for Xiaoju's psychological trick. This morning they went out of the city to fight the Nanfu soldiers. After a long period of preparation, the victory of this battle was a matter of course. Tens of thousands of enemy soldiers were captured, and numerous war horses and weapons were obtained. The remaining small portion of Yudo fled in panic. At this point, the situation in Yunzi was set. It was rare for the Nanfu soldiers to celebrate in the city. From spring to autumn, close to half a year had passed. Although it looked easy, only they knew that the days were tough. Yunzi was near the ocean, and the nights were humid. Many soldiers had red rashes on their bodies, and once night fell, they would feel unbearably itchy. There was also army grain, which was not enough for them to eat. The buckets of white rice that the Yudo saw every day were actually the same buckets. "We can finally go home." A slightly younger Nanfu soldier grinned. "I've spent enough time in Yunzi, so I'm going back to the capital." Chiwu walked past him and wanted to scold him. However, when the words reached his mouth, he did not say anything. Instead, he let out a smile. To be able to go home alive, just hearing about it made one happy. Within the tent, the military doctor was treating the injuries of the main general. The young man's shirt was pulled down to his shoulders, and his chest was wrapped in a thick cloth. Since he was the commander of the right army, he was naturally the target of all the attacks from the Yudo. He was injured in the end. However, the black armor covered his wound, so no one saw him bleeding. Hence, people always thought that General Fengyan would not be injured. "Commander, don't do anything too serious these few days," the white-bearded old military doctor reminded. "Although the arrow did not hit any vital parts, the wound is very deep. It's best to rest for a few days to prevent any problems in the future." Xiaoju pulled his outer robe over his wound and nodded. "Thank you." Just as the old military doctor left, someone came in. It was Fei Nu. He held a letter in his hand and walked over quickly. He had a rare anxious expression. "Young master, there's a letter from Ji County." Ji County was far away from Yunzi. When the letter was sent, a few days had already passed. The last time they received a letter from Ji County, it was when they learned of Yanhe's death. Jiuchuan had already received the news that Ji County had lost its main general. He Yan had led the Fuyua army to help. This time, the letter was sent after He Yan had arrived at Ji County. Fei Nu passed the letter to Xiaoju. His expression was ugly. Although he did not open the letter, he had already heard the news from the person who delivered the letter. It was not good news. Ji County was easy to defend and hard to attack. The Yan army had lost their main general, and their morale was not stable. If they did not end the war quickly, it would only be disadvantageous to Dawei. He Yan brought 2,000 soldiers and horses, and pretended to surrender to enter the city in an attempt to break through the Yudo's formation. When the city was in chaos, he would take the opportunity to open the city gates and let the Fuyua army and the rest of the Yen army work together to kill the Yudo. There were no problems with the plan. Unfortunately, during the execution of the plan, one of the Yen army soldiers could not resist the provocation of the Yudo and attacked. The plan was disrupted. He Yen led the Dawei soldiers to fight with the Yudo. Although they opened the city gates and won the battle, He Yen was seriously injured and his situation was not good. Xiao Ju stared at the letter in front of him. The letter was written by Lin Shuanghe. The handwriting was very messy. It could be seen that when he wrote the letter, the situation was very urgent. Although the higher-ups did not say how bad the situation was, it was easy to imagine. 2,000 soldiers entered the city. If they attacked first, it would be like a sheep entering a tiger's den. They did not have any weapons and were already at a disadvantage. Furthermore, it was difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. What was more serious was that although they won the battle, once the Yudo knew that their general was injured, they would definitely counterattack. Lin Shuanghe did not understand the situation of the battle. The letter was also unclear. He did not know what the situation was like. Fei Nu looked at Xiao Ju's expression. Honestly speaking, this letter came at the wrong time. The battle at Yunzi only needed to be wrapped up. This letter would definitely cause Xiao Ju to panic. But Yunzi and Ji County were not in the same direction. Even if they turned around and went to Ji County to help, they would not be able to make it in time. They could only watch helplessly. How difficult was that? Young master, should we go to Ji County? No need. Xiao Ju interrupted him. Fei Nu did not dare to speak. Xiao Ju stood up and walked out of the tent. Outside, the west wind blew against his face. It was almost the beginning of autumn. All the heat in the night had faded away, leaving only the cold air. In the distance, the sea was vast and the sound of the waves was fierce. The clear moon reflected in the clouds and dyed the sea white. The night at the border had always been like this. The sun was cold and the grass was short. The moon was bitter and white. But what was the difference between the moonlight in the desert and the moonlight by the sea? There was a faint pain in his chest. He did not know if it was a wound or something else. He looked up and quietly looked at the cold moon in the sky. A woman's clear voice floated in his ears. I want you to promise me that if there is news, no matter what it is, do what you have to do. Do not affect the overall situation. Do not stop. Continue to move forward. Continue to move forward. After a while he retracted his gaze and turned to walk in the direction of the tent. The deputy general went forward and asked hesitantly, Commander-in-Chief, next? After daybreak, head north to clean up the remaining soldiers, he said. The summer heat in Jiang was finally blown away by the autumn wind and rain. In the morning, under the parasol tree outside the palace hall, a thick layer of golden leaves fell into the pond. Occasionally, fish swam to the surface of the water and lightly poked at the leaves before quickly swimming away. Only the ripples created by the fish's tails were left. Mu Hongjin walked into the courtyard. A servant said, Your Highness, Lord Cui is here. Cui Yuezhi walked in from outside. He had lost a lot of weight over the past few days and looked more energetic than before. When Yudo invaded Dawei's territory, Jiang City's army was not strong. Previously, because of Xiao Ju and He Yen, they won despite being outnumbered. Now Xiao Ju and He Yen had gone to their respective battlefields. Although Jiang City was safe now, the previous incident was a lesson. After the end of the year, Cui Yuezhi stayed in the training field every day to train Jiang City's army. He wanted to be strong and confident when facing the enemy if they came one day. He bowed to Mu Hongjin and handed her a scroll. Your Highness, this is the battle report from Ji County and Yunzi. Mu Hongjin reached out and took it. She had also aged a little, but now, she did not let the servant pull out the new white hair on her head every day. Therefore, there were specks of white in her hair. However, she did not care. Mu Xiaolu had gradually grown up, and Jiang City would be handed over to the new princess sooner or later. Everyone would grow old, and growing old shouldn't be such a scary thing. She opened the scroll and looked at the words on it for a long time. Then, she closed the scroll and sighed. Jiuchuan and Yunzi have been taken back. Everything is fine in Bingjiang. There is also good news from Ji County. Your Highness, are you worried about Miss He? Cui Yuezhi asked. He Yan's life and death were unknown. This was indeed a matter of concern. Cui Yuezhi still remembered the last time he saw He Yan. When she was not holding a weapon, she was like an ordinary girl. She loved to smile brightly and was very bright. When she picked up a weapon, it was as if she was born for the battlefield. Although at that time, they were very clear that He Yan was not an ordinary girl. When they heard that she led the Fuyue army to Jiuquan alone, they could not help but be shocked. That young General Fei Hong was also a girl, but the 1 in 10,000 woman in that world was no longer in this world. How lucky they were to be able to see another person in their lifetime. But now, could it be that this female general was also going to fall early like General Fei Hong? The woman dressed in a wide-sleeved red robe gently shook her head. Her gaze was a little disappointed. This highness just did not want. She did not want to see a lover like her, unable to have a good ending. It was too difficult to have a perfect ending in this world. She was already like this, so she really did not want to see the disciple of her sweetheart embark on the path of separation between heaven and earth like her. In the Buddhist temple in Runda City, the Golden Buddha looked kindly at all living beings. The women in the temple were kneeling on the haystacks, closing their eyes and praying for blessings for people far away. These were the female captives that He Yan rescued from Yudo during the battle in Runda City. If He Yan had not stopped them at that time, they would have been a pile of bones by now. They would not be alive today. Since He Yan left the Runda City, the county magistrate of Runda City, Zhao Shiming, was entrusted by He Yan to help take care of these women. Most of them were not recognized by their families. Some of them even thought that their families had died in the hands of Yudo. Zhao Shiming found an embroidery workshop in the city for them to do embroidery work on a daily basis to make a living. For these women, being able to do so was already a pleasant surprise. Although they had not completely walked out of their inferiority complex, in the end, they already had the courage to face the future again. When the news that He Yan led the troops to help Ji County and was seriously injured spread to the Runda City, these women were all burning with anxiety. They only wished that they were men and could go to the battlefield together with the heroine to kill the enemy. Now, they could only pray for He Yan in the temple. They prayed that the young and brave girl would recover soon and return safely. Outside the temple, the county magistrate who was dressed in a long robe sighed. Look, they are so sincere. In their hearts, they really respect Xiao He. Beside him, Li Kuang looked at the women in the temple and did not speak. It had been almost a year since Yi Luo passed away. Even so, sometimes when he spoke or did something, he would subconsciously look for that delicate figure. Countless nights he would wake up from his dreams. He would always remember that day when Yi Luo looked at him. There was no resentment, only doubt and confusion. He Yan was right. He was indeed wrong. Therefore, from then on until now, he had spent more time training the Runda City army. The mistake he made could not be made up for. The only thing he could do was to prevent such a mistake from happening again. Lord Li has seen it now. They have survived and are living well, Zhao Shiming said. When He Yan saved these women, everyone thought that she was just wasting her energy. Because women who had been humiliated by the enemy, even if they were lucky enough to survive, they would not be able to fight against the eyes of the world. The criticism and ridicule behind their backs would be the last straw that broke their backs. Leaving this world was their choice sooner or later. Before He Yan left, she told Zhao Shiming how to settle these women. She even left a sum of money for herself. She was sincerely thinking for these women. And now, these women did not let her down. Li Kuang lowered his head and laughed self-deprecatingly. I am not as good as her. How many people in this world can be compared to Xiao He? Zhao Shiming stroked his beard. I hope that Xiao He can turn misfortune into fortune in Ji County. If she is here, these women will have a place to belong in their hearts. Zhao Shiming looked at the distant sky. A group of autumn geese flew by. He looked for a while and said in a low voice, I hope so. Chapter 266. A long time had passed. After the spring and the mid-autumn, the wind was getting colder and colder. Winter was coming. Yudo had been completely defeated, and in the next 10 years, it would be impossible for him to have any thoughts about Dawei. Jiuquan, Ji County, Yunzi, and Bingjiang sent the news back to Shuo. and countless people celebrated. Amidst the excitement and joy, there were also some sad events. For example, the death of Lieutenant General Guide Yan Nongguang in battle. When the news reached Shuo and the Yan family, Yan He's mother fainted on the spot, and his wife, Xia Qingxiu, went into labor early. Probably because she was heartbroken. The labor was extremely dangerous, and even the midwives were helpless. At the moment of life and death, Lin Shuanghe's father, Lin Mu, rushed over with his female disciple and personally helped Xia Qingxiu deliver the baby. Everyone in the Yan family gathered outside the delivery room. And when they heard the weak voice of the woman inside and saw the basin of blood being carried out, they couldn't help but be shocked. Master Yan, who had never believed in Buddhism, went to his ancestral hall and knelt on the ground to pray for the safety of the mother and son. In the room, Xia Qingxiu's forehead was covered in sweat, and her expression was pained. She could only feel the strength in her body slowly disappearing. Even as she was dying, she could still feel the pain in her heart. The pain in her heart was greater than all the pain in front of her, and it made it difficult for her to even breathe. Yan He had died in battle. As the wife of a general, from the day she married Yan He, she should have been prepared for this day. War was cruel, and the battlefield was constantly changing. No one could guarantee that they would be the one to survive. Xia Qingxiu had thought countless times that since she had decided to become his wife, when the day came, she should be calm and magnanimous. Even if her heart was filled with unwillingness, she should be able to withstand the hardships on her face. However, when the day came, she realized that she was weak. She was weaker than she thought. In the eyes of outsiders, that man who was fierce, bad-tempered, and liked to provoke her had never said a harsh word to her. Ever since they got married, Xia Qingxiu was grateful to the heavens. This marriage was indeed a happy one that she had never imagined. However, the good things in the world were not firm, and the colorful clouds scattered easily. It was because it was too perfect that it was so short. While she was in a daze, she seemed to see a familiar figure in front of her. It was Yan He in his silver robe and long spear. He seemed to have returned from the outside, and was covered in dust. His eyes were fixed on her, and there was a familiar smile on his lips. It was a little proud and a little boastful. Just like in the past, he had returned after winning a battle. Yan He extended a hand towards him. Xia Qingxiu stared at him in a daze, subconsciously wanting to place her hand in his. The female doctor beside her saw her expression and was shocked. She shouted, "Madam Yan, hold on, don't fall asleep, don't be discouraged." Then she looked at the curtain and said anxiously, "Master, Madam Yan can't hold on." Lin Mu's heart tightened behind the curtain. He couldn't care about anything else and shouted, "Madam Yan, think about the child in your belly. Don't you want to see what he looks like? Don't you want to be with him as he grows up? Madam Yan, even if it's for your child, you have to be strong. Child." It was as if a clear hole was torn open in the chaos. "Child, Wuxia." She suddenly opened her eyes. This was her and Yan He's child. Before Yan He left, he had sincerely apologized to her belly for not being able to stay by her side. He hoped that it would be a young lady, but if it was a young master, he would love it just as much. Just as he had guessed countless times what the child would look like in the future, Xia Qingxiu had also described the child's features many times. If he was a young master, he would look like Yan He with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and high spirits. If he was a young lady, he would be like her, gentle, delicate, obedient, and cute. She hadn't even seen the child. How could she let go and leave? She couldn't. Xia Qingxiu suddenly sobered up. She couldn't. At least, she couldn't wallow in her sorrow now. She was Yan He's wife. She was also his mother. Wah! A baby's cry sounded in the courtyard of the Yan family. Master Yan, who was praying in the ancestral hall with his hands clasped together, was stunned. Then tears flowed down his face. The female doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations, Madam Yan, it's a young master." Lin Mu, who was behind the curtain, suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. When the news from Ji County came, he also felt sad for Yan He. Lin Shuanghe couldn't save Yan He, but at least he saved his child. Xia Qingxiu was exhausted. Her sweat-soaked hair stuck to her cheeks. In a daze she saw Yan He again. The man smiled warmly, as if he was a little apologetic. He said to her, "I'm sorry." Xia Qingxiu's tears gushed out. She reached out and tried to grab the person in front of her, but he smiled. Qingxiu, I'm leaving. Nan Guang. The man turned around and strode forward. His back was elegant and neat. As he walked, his figure completely disappeared from her sight. When Xia Qingxiu gave birth to her son, Xiaoju returned to the capital with the Nanfu army. Emperor Zhaokong was very happy and rewarded her countless times. The courtiers secretly thought that the new emperor wanted to put General Fengyan in an important position. Now that Su Jingfu was no longer around, the Xiao family in Dawei would rise again in the future. The courtiers had their own thoughts, but the common people didn't think so much. They only thought that General Fengyan was General Fengyan. Yunzi was in danger, but she still won. Not long after Xiaoju returned to the capital, General Hui also led his army back from Bingjiang. At this point, only the Fuyue army led by He Yan and the Yan family army had not returned. However, although they hadn't returned, everyone knew that it was only a matter of time. After all, Jiuquan and Ji County had already been recovered. Calculating the time, they should be on their way back to the capital. He Yunqing woke up even earlier every day. Other than going to school, he would wake up before dawn and climb up Donghuang Mountain to chop firewood. He Yunqing didn't have to work so hard to make a living now. He chopped firewood not for the sake of living, but to improve his skills. If one day his skills were better than He Yan's, then when He Yan went to the battlefield in the future, he could go with him. Every day after school, he would run to the Xiao family. Every day when he saw Xiaoju, the first thing he asked was, "Brother-in-law, is there any news about my sister?" Xiaoju always shook her head and said, "No. No, what a depressing answer." Ji County won the battle, but He Yunqing also learned that He Yan was seriously injured during the battle. After that, there was no more news. Even if there was a message, it didn't explain He Yan's situation. He Yunqing resisted telling He Sui about this. He Sui was old, and he was afraid that He Sui would be worried every day if she knew about this. However, He Yunqing still hoped for good news every day. Not long after, Bai Rongwei also gave birth to a daughter. Xiao Jing was very happy. Because of the Xiao family's accident, Bai Rongwei's body became ill. And this pregnancy was especially difficult. Now that both mother and daughter were safe, it was a good thing. Cheng Li Su and Song Taotao came to visit Bai Rongwei with many gifts. Xiao family was very popular in Emperor Zhaokong's eyes, and the relatives of the past remembered their old relationship. Cheng Li Su asked the servants of the Xiao family to take care of the cloth and tonics sent by his mother. He looked around and didn't see Xiaoju, so he asked Xiao Jing, "Eldest uncle, is little uncle not in the residence?" He hadn't seen Xiaoju for a long time. Xiao Jing was startled. He should be in the ancestral hall at this time. Cheng Li Su stood up and said, "I'll go find him." Then he ran away. He had a close relationship with Xiaoju, so Xiao Jing and Bai Rongwei were used to it. Song Taotao, on the other hand, waited until Cheng Li Su ran away and asked Bai Rongwei, "Young Mistress Xiao, is there any news about Lord He?" Bai Rongwei heard this and sighed, shaking her head. Song Taotao was a little disappointed. On the other hand, Cheng Li Su ran to the entrance of the ancestral hall. The weather was getting colder, the fallen leaves in the courtyard were falling, and a layer of frost had accumulated on the roof tiles. He tiptoed inside and saw a young man standing in front of the memorial tablet in the middle of the ancestral hall. His dark blue robe made him look cold and distant. His gaze was calm and peaceful as he looked at the memorial tablet. Cheng Li Su suddenly remembered a summer afternoon many years ago when the thunderstorm was endless. He was also like this. In order to chase a cat, he accidentally hid here and accidentally bumped into the heart of a cold and emotionless youth. The gentleness that was hard to see in the world. The young man's voice sounded, "Why are you hiding behind me?" Cheng Li Su was surprised that he had been discovered. He walked in obediently and called out, "Uncle." Xiaoju didn't look at him. It was a habit he had since he was young. Whenever he felt uneasy or irritated, he would walk here and light 3 sticks of incense. After 3 sticks of incense, everything would go on as usual. His uneasiness and fear couldn't be seen by outsiders. Just like now, under the seemingly calm surface, there were turbulent waves. "Uncle, are you worried about Aunt?" Cheng Li Su asked. Xiaoju was silent. After a long time, so long that Cheng Lisu thought Xiaoju wouldn't answer him, Xiaoju said, yes. Cheng Lisu looked at him. I just want her to be safe and sound. Coming out of Bai Rongwei's room, Song Taotao felt a little depressed. She was also worried when she heard about He Yan. Even though she had been secretly distressed for a long time because of the fact that He Yan was a woman, but now, those were all things of the past. In all fairness, even if He Yan was a woman, she actually liked He Yan very much. Death was fair to everyone. That was why the battlefield was so cruel. When one truly realized the cruelty, one would begin to grow up. The biggest worries of a carefree young girl in the past were that her hairpin didn't look good today, and her new lipstick was too dull. Now she finally understood the feeling of helplessness. Perhaps she was also beginning to grow up. A young man in green walked towards her. His features were delicate and arrogant, and he was somewhat similar to the cheerful and lively young girl. Song Taotao stopped in her tracks. She remembered this young man. He was He Yan's younger brother. His temperament was completely different from He Yan's, but the determination in his eyes were especially similar. He Yansheng also saw her. She seemed to be a young lady from a rich family that He Yan met in the Liang province guard. Perhaps she was a guest of the Xiao family. He came to the Xiao family today to inquire about He Yan. Of course, he didn't hear what he wanted. He forgot Song Taotao's name. He only nodded slightly as a greeting, and was about to walk past. Hey! Song Taotao instinctively called out to him. He Yansheng stopped in his tracks and looked up. Miss, is there anything else? Song Taotao pursed her lips and thought for a moment before saying, don't worry. Marquis Wuan will definitely return safely. He Yansheng was startled, as if he didn't expect her to say this. After a moment of silence, he said to her, thank you. Then he turned and left. Song Taotao looked at his back. She didn't know if he was looking at the person walking away or at herself. She whispered to herself, she will definitely return. It was snowing all night. The fruits on the pomegranate tree in front of the window had turned red at some point. They fell on the branches, and the shadow of the tree was like a remnant of red. The little girl, Bai Gua, stood under the tree. Early in the morning, she was drooling as she looked at the biggest and reddest pomegranate on the branches. The second young master's courtyard was cold and cheerless. The most lively thing was this pomegranate tree. The biggest pomegranate was like a small lantern. It looked very sweet. Qingmei walked past. Seeing Bai Gua's infatuated expression, she couldn't help but lightly knock on Bai Gua's head. Greedy. Bai Gua smacked her lips. Just as she was about to speak, she looked up and saw Xiaoju walking out. She hurriedly said, young master. Xiaoju glanced at her. What's the matter? Bai Gua pointed at the tree. Look, the pomegranate has turned red. Xiaoju turned his head to look. The fruits on the tree added a thin layer of color to the green, like a lamp burning in the night. It's so red. It must be very sweet. Bai Gua said as she bit her finger. Qingmei couldn't help but whisper. The young master wants to leave the sweetest pomegranate for the young mistress. What are you looking at? Bai Gua explained in a low voice. I know. I just wanted to ask if the smallest one could be left for us. Her voice gradually trailed off. In the end, she didn't dare to finish her sentence. Xiaoju walked to the side of the pomegranate tree. Suddenly, she recalled a time last year. There was a girl who stood under this pomegranate tree and tried her best to pick the pomegranates on the tree. Later on, the matters in the capital piled up like a mountain. She didn't have time to pick the biggest pomegranate, and it was already ripe on the branch. She regretted it for a long time. Now the time was just right, but the person who picked the pomegranate had not returned. He casually picked up a stone under the tree and looked at the farthest tip of the tree. With a slight movement of his fingers, the stone flew towards the tip of the tree. The fiery red pomegranate that looked like a lantern fell into his palm. It was heavy and bright red. He withdrew his hand. At this time of the year, pomegranates should be placed in the well in the courtyard and soaked in cold water. This way, when He Yan returned, it would be just right. Xiaoju was about to leave when Qi Wu ran in from outside. He was panting as he said, Young master! Young master! The Fuyue army has returned to the capital. Qingmei and Bai Guo were stunned. Then they became happy. Just as they were about to speak, they raised their heads and felt a strong wind sweep past them. When they looked at the courtyard again, Xiaoju was already gone. Only the pomegranate tree that bore fruit was more beautiful than the winter plum blossoms. The city gate was already filled with commoners who had rushed over after hearing the news. They blocked both sides of the street. Most of the people who came to welcome them were those whose family members had joined the army. Many women held their young children's hands and stood in the wind, carefully looking for familiar faces in the crowd. If they saw a family member who was still alive, they would ignore the situation and rush over to hug the person's head and cry. There were also old men who shakily came out with crutches. They looked at the crowd from head to toe until their eyes turned cold with disappointment. A war. Countless families were torn apart. Separation and reunion, joy and tears, tragedy and comedy, without exception, were played out one by one. When Xiaoju arrived, the army had already passed through the city gate. The number of soldiers and horses that had set out before was now reduced by half. Everyone's face was filled with fatigue and joy. However, at the front, there was no familiar hardy figure riding on a horse. His gaze suddenly froze. When returning to the capital, the chief general who had performed meritorious deeds would always be at the front. There had never been an exception. But now there was no one. There was no sign of He Yan. That year, when He Yan was the General Feihong, he didn't see him when he returned to the capital. Later, He Yan joked with him, "Xiaoju, one day, I will definitely let you see my heroic appearance when I return from a victorious battle." But now, from head to toe, there was no sign of her in the long line of soldiers and horses. For many years, perhaps since Xiao Zhongwu and Madame Xiao had passed away, he had never been at such a loss. For a moment, he didn't even know where and when he was. The bustling crowd seemed to be very far away from him. Some people walked by in front of him, but did not notice that this young man who seemed to have lost his soul was the Great Wei's right army commander-in-chief. They were so crowded that the pomegranate in his hand slipped out of his hand and rolled into the crowd without a trace. He seemed to have returned to that night when he was young. All of his calmness suddenly cracked. He was so panicked that he didn't know what to do. It seemed like a long time had passed, but also like not much time had passed. He seemed to understand what he had to do next. He turned around and then froze. There was a young woman leaning against the wall by the street. She was wearing a red warrior's outfit, a green sword at her waist. She was looking at him with a smile. She tossed a red fruit up and down in her hand. It was the pomegranate that he had dropped into the crowd. "Hey." Seeing him look over, she called out in an indecent manner, "Young master over there, my leg is injured and I can't walk forward anymore. Can I trouble you to walk forward a bit?" The young man's gaze passed through the crowd and focused on her for a long time. Then he walked towards her. Step by step. It was as if he had crossed all of the mountains and seas and finally found his place in the world after a long life. The girl smiled and opened her arms wide, as if asking for a hug. He quickly walked forward and hugged this person tightly in his arms. In that instant, there was silence. Only the two of them in each other's arms became the most long-lasting attachment. In the crowd around them, some were happy, some were crying, some were reunited, and some were parting. They snuggled up to each other under the bustle of the world. Even if there were thousands of things, they couldn't be said. The young man's brocade clothes were like a painting. He gently patted her head. The warmth of his palm made He Yan's eyes burn. Unknowingly, tears fell. "It's been a long time, Military Governor Xiao," she said softly. "In the world of North, South, East, West, Birth and Old, it was such a blessing that they could always meet and reunite." Chapter 267. In the end, De Wei won the war against Wu Tuo. After Wu Tuo was defeated, the king of Wu Tuo personally wrote a letter of surrender and ordered the prince and the envoy to come and beg for forgiveness. He promised that in the next 100 years he would not take the initiative to send troops and form an alliance with De Wei and become a vassal state of De Wei. He also left the prince in De Wei as a hostage to show his allegiance. Emperor Zhaokong was pleased and rewarded the soldiers who led the troops to the battlefield. He even made Marquis Wu Enhian a third-rank general and gave her the title of Guiyue. Henceforth, she was the first female general in the history of the Great Wei dynasty. In the courtyard, Sui looked at the gifts piled up in front of the door and said worriedly, "The cloth and rice can be stored for a long time, but what about these fruits? We don't have many people at home. I'm afraid they will spoil before we finish eating." Yinxing glanced at them and said, "Send them to brother-in-law's house. Brother-in-law has many family members. However, father, you are insulting Yan's appetite by worrying about whether we can finish eating. How can you talk about your sister like that?" Sui slapped him to the side and said, "Quickly bring the soup in the kitchen to Yan Yan." Yinxing rolled his eyes and went to the kitchen in resignation. Yan was sitting in the room looking at Yinxing's recent homework. Xiaoju was sitting beside her. She had trouble walking now and her leg injury would not heal in a short time. However, she was not someone who could sit down. She was nagged by Rongwei and Sui 100 times every day. Yinxing walked in from outside while she was sitting. She held a porcelain bowl in her hands and placed it in front of Yan. She said unhappily, "Father personally stewed this bone soup for you. Drink it." "Why is it bone soup again?" Yan's face turned bitter. She was not a picky eater, but she could not stand the bone soup 3 times a day. Looking at the bowl of soup that was bigger than her face, she felt like her stomach was going to burst with oil. "Didn't you hurt your leg? Father said that you can nourish yourself with whatever you eat. You should nourish yourself well." Pausing for a moment, he finally couldn't help but reprimand her. "They say that it takes 100 days to recover from a serious injury. Since your leg is injured, don't run around if you have nothing to do. Why don't you just stay at home and recuperate? His Majesty has already approved your leave. Why don't you take your body seriously?" He nagged on, acting more like a father than Sui. Yan couldn't take it anymore and looked at Xiaoju for help. However, this person clearly saw her predicament. Yet he just sat there and drank his tea calmly. After Yinxing finished speaking, he asked Xiaoju, "Brother-in-law, do you think I'm right?" Xiaoju replied slowly, "That's right." "Did you hear that, Yan?" Yinxing was more confident now that he had someone to back him up. "You should be more sensible." I won't say any more. I'm going to feed Xiang." Yinxing rattled on until he was satisfied. He said, "Finish the soup. Father made it himself, don't leave a single drop behind." Then he went out. Yan saw him go out and stared at the bowl of soup in front of him. Finally he looked at Xiaoju. "Xiaoju?" "No." This person replied heartlessly. Yan looked at him and felt a headache. "Military Governor Xiao, you are using your position to avenge a private grudge. It's been so long, why are you still angry?" He raised his eyebrows. "I'm not angry." Yan looked at him and suddenly remembered that the last time she was angry at Xiaoju, it was in the Ji County's camp. That was the day she and her 2,000 soldiers pretended to surrender. Some of the Yan army couldn't stand the provocation of the Yudo. In a moment of impulse, they changed the plan. She was in the city, took the Yudo's sword and fought with them. The soldiers outside the city couldn't enter, so someone had to open the city gates. Shi Jiangjiao and Wang Ba fought as they walked to the city gate tower. Soldiers were never alone in a battle. If they were outnumbered, they would be at a disadvantage. If they ran to the city gate tower, they would become targets. Yan was also injured. Her leg was cut by the Yudo's sword. The wound was so deep that her bones could be seen. With every step she took, the wound pulled at her muscles, and it was painful. Wang Ba and Jiang Jiao were afraid that she wouldn't be able to hold on for long, but she actually held on. The city gates were finally opened, and the soldiers waiting outside the city finally entered. They had won the battle. When Yan got off his horse, he couldn't feel his right leg. After a long time of activity, his pants were stained red with blood. The fabric was stuck to his flesh, and when he tore it off, his skin and flesh were exposed. It was a hair-raising sight. When Lin Shuanghe saw Yan's wound, his face turned pale. He ordered someone to help him into the tent. Yan had lost too much blood. When he fell on the bed, he was so sleepy that he couldn't open his eyes. When he was in a daze, he only had one thought in his mind. "It's over, it's over." He didn't go back alive. He broke his promise. Xiaoju must be angry again. In fact, she wasn't afraid of Xiaoju being angry. Although Xiaoju got angry more easily than her, she was still easy to appease. However, she was also afraid that Xiaoju would really be angry. He Yan knew that he had never been angry with her in the past. Lin Shuanghe busied himself in her tent for a day and a night. When He Yan woke up, the light in the tent flickered. Someone was leaning against the bed and dozing off. When He Yan moved, he woke up. "Hey, brother Lin." He Yan forced a smile. His voice was a little dry. "You can't fool around with a friend's wife. Did you sleep with me for a night?" She was still in the mood to joke. Lin Shuanghe looked at her with a serious expression and said, "He Yan, you have to rest." Lin Shuanghe was very dangerous when it came to saving people. It wasn't easy for her to keep her life. However, even though her life was saved, if she did not rest well and continued to jump around like before, then it was very likely that she would not be able to keep her leg in the future. He Yan's face was pale. She smiled at him and said, "That won't do. The battle isn't over yet." Just like before Yan, he died. Even though he knew that intense activity would cause the poison to spread even faster and become a death sentence for him, he still went into battle with his injuries. He Yan was the same. It was already the most crucial time. If they didn't seize the opportunity and let the Yudo have a chance to counterattack, it would be very troublesome. "Wrap it up tightly for me," He Yan said. "Try not to affect my performance on the battlefield." "Aren't you afraid, your right leg?" "At most, it's just a cripple." He Yan smiled. "Moreover, it's possible that it'll be fine." She struggled to get up. Without any pause, she started to arrange the upcoming battle. Lin Shuanghe once thought that He Yan's leg would really be lost. However, He Yan was luckier than Yan He. On the way back from Ji County to Shuajing, Lin Shuanghe used all his knowledge on He Yan. In the beginning, He Yan's situation was really bad. It was so bad that when Lin Shuanghe wrote a letter, he didn't know where to start. Later, He Yan got better. He wrote He Yan's situation in his letter. In the end, something happened at the relay station. This made Xiao Ju worried for many days. However, this leg injury had to be taken care of. He Yan looked at him and asked, "You're really not angry?" Xiao Ju looked at the tea in front of her attentively. She clutched her chest and said, "Ah, my leg." In an instant, this person looked at her. Seeing that she was pretending, he paused and said, "You're injured on your leg. Why are you clutching your chest?" "It's my leg that hurts, but it's my heart that hurts." He Yan looked at him bitterly. "I'm already very hurt, but you're still so cold." Although he knew that this person in front of him could lie easily, he still sighed and sat down in front of her. He asked, "Is it very painful?" He Yan said seriously, "Yes, but if you say a few words of concern, it might not hurt anymore." Xiao Ju was speechless. He was so angry that he laughed. Seeing that he laughed, He Yan rested her chin on her hand and looked at him. She tugged at his sleeve and said, "All right, Military Governor Xiao, don't be angry. Next time, I'll take good care of myself. I won't joke about my life. This time, I made you worry for so long. It's my fault. I didn't know that something could go wrong at the relay station." She had to take the blame for this. Xiao Ju's gaze fell on her. This person had a cheeky smile on her face and didn't look sad at all. However, she didn't know the fear in his heart when he couldn't find her. He wasn't angry. It was more likely that he felt helpless because he couldn't help her when she was in danger. However, he knew that if he could do it again, He Yan would still make the same choice. If it was him, he would also do the same. But she was still here. Being able to play happily in front of him was already a blessing from the heavens. It was enough. After a while, he looked at He Yan and smiled. "Okay." He Yan was overjoyed. "That's right, but I won't help you finish this bowl of soup," He Yan said. "Xiao Ju, you're really petty." 2 days later, He Yan and Xiao Ju went to see Xia Qingxiu. He Yan originally thought that he would see a sad and depressed girl. However, to his surprise, Xia Qingxiu actually looked pretty good. When He Yan saw her, she was shaking a small red drum and playing with a baby in a bamboo basket. The baby's eyes were open and his eyes were following the movements of the small drum. He was babbling something that no one knew what he was saying. Xia Qingxiu was amused by him and laughed. He Yan called out, "Miss Qingxiu." Xia Qingxiu saw her and was surprised for a moment. Then he said, "Miss He." Xia Qingxiu had lost a lot of weight and his clothes looked very loose. However, his complexion was still good. He wondered if it was because he had become a mother, but he had become more gentle. He Yan originally thought about how to comfort her and make Xia Qingxiu feel better. Now that he saw her, he realized that the words he had prepared were useless. Miss Qingxiu, how have you been these days? He Yan thought for a long time and finally asked this question. I've been fine. Xia Qingxiu smiled and said, with Wuxia by my side, the days haven't been too hard. He Yan felt a little sad when he heard this. Xia Qingxiu looked at her and smiled instead. Miss He, don't be sad for me. When I first heard about Yan He's news, I couldn't accept it. I even thought about leaving with him. However, now that I have Wuxia, my original obsession has gradually dissipated. When I married Yan He, I knew that there might be a day like this. I just didn't expect it to come so early. She lowered her head and smiled. But since I've made my choice, there's nothing to say. Yan He is already gone, and the living have to live a good life. She looked at Wuxia in the basket. I think that God is not too cruel to me. At least I still have Wuxia. She had lived a clear life. There were some things that Xia Qingxiu understood without He Yan saying it. However, He Yan thought that sometimes being overly intelligent and sensible might make people feel more sorry for her. She chatted with Xia Qingxiu for a while more before she got up and left. After that, He Yan went to Hong Shan's home. Hong Shan was not like Shitu and Huang Xiong, who still had a young brother and an old mother at home. Hong Shan's mother cried every day. He Yan helped find a school so that his younger brother could go to school. He also helped his mother's family with their expenses. Just as Xia Qingxiu said, the dead were gone, and the people left behind had to live a good life. The only thing she could do for Hong Shan was to take care of his family for him. In the winter, at a restaurant in Linjiang, a flag with the word, wine, written on it fluttered in the wind. A brawny man carrying a large knife walked up to the woman selling wine and asked in a rough voice, Do you have apricot wine? The woman looked up and saw the scars on the man's face. He looked like a bandit. She was a little scared and whispered, I'm sorry, sir. We don't have apricot wine in the winter. We only have rice wine. She thought that this fierce man would be angry. She didn't expect him to just say, 3 bowls of rice wine. He put the money on the table and walked inside. The woman was stunned for a moment. She hurriedly got up and walked to the wine jar to get a wooden spoon. Wang Ba looked at the small winery with a silent expression. Before he came here, he went to the bandit stronghold and gave the reward money he earned to his brothers. He told them not to rob in the future. He saw that the stronghold was now raising fish and living a good life. They shouldn't touch the life of living on the edge of a knife anymore. When he went to Jiuquan, Huang Xiong told him that the apricot wine in this restaurant in Linjiang was particularly sweet and fragrant. He promised to invite him to drink here when he came back from the war. He gladly agreed. But now, he was the only one who came here to drink. Time passed quickly. It didn't leave any traces, but there were traces everywhere. He was no longer as fierce and aggressive as he was when he first entered the army. The children in the stronghold said that he had become much gentler. He didn't know what was going on, but this was good. To them, being able to come back alive was already a blessing from the heavens. 3 bowls of wine were quickly served. It was home-brewed rice wine. The wine looked turbid and suffused with a simple spicy taste. He raised his head and drank all the wine in the bowl in front of him. From his throat to his lower abdomen, he immediately felt a burning heat. Old brother. He wiped his mouth and exhaled a breath that reeked of alcohol. He didn't know who he was talking to. The wine is good. No one answered him. A moment later, he picked up the remaining 2 bowls of wine and walked to the window. In front of the window, a thin willow swayed in the wind. In the winter, the branches and leaves were bare. But not long after, when spring came, new green would grow here. He turned his hand and poured the 2 bowls of wine into the ground in front of the willow. The wine seeped in little by little. He silently watched for a while, then said in a low voice, I'll also invite you to try it. In the noodle shop in the east of the city, the busy young girl had changed into a light blue dress. There was a circle of fluffy rabbit fur embroidered on the edge of the dress. Velvet flowers of the same color were inserted into her hair bun, which made her already delicate and pretty face even more delicate. The closer it was to winter, the better the business of the noodle shop became. On a cold winter morning, Eating a bowl of piping hot Yangchun noodles in the morning would make one feel warm from the bottom of their heart. Sun Xiaolan was so busy that her feet didn't touch the ground. Only when the last bowl of noodles was delivered could she take a break. She was wiping the sweat on her forehead with a handkerchief when she suddenly saw a familiar figure in the crowd. It was a somewhat dark and handsome young man. As he walked by the street, Sun Xiaolan found him familiar and couldn't help but take a few more glances. Then she remembered that at the beginning of spring this year, she had seen this young man. There was also a handsome young man who was taciturn. After they left a pot of peach blossoms on the table. The young girl's heart suddenly felt a burst of joy. Just as she was about to call out to him, someone behind her said, "Little girl, I'd like another bowl of Yangchun noodles here." Sun Xiaolan responded with her mouth. When she looked up again, she saw that the figure had already disappeared from the crowd. Where did he go? The urging voice behind her didn't make her think too much. She only thought to herself, forget it. Since these two young men are in Shoa capital, there will definitely be a chance to meet them in the future. Who knows, maybe in a few days they will come to this noodle house. Thinking of this, her heart became happy again. Amidst the hubbub of voices, only the pot of peach blossoms in front of the noodle house's wooden cabinet looked lonely and bleak in the winter. The flower pot was beautifully painted, as if it was a brilliant spring day. The snow pressed down heavily on the eaves. When He Yan came out of the military department, the sky was already dark. Although her leg was injured and Zhaokong Emperor had temporarily allowed her to take sick leave, after the Battle of Jiuquanji County, the follow-up military affairs were busy. She still had to go to the military department to discuss matters with her colleagues. It was inconvenient for Qing Mei, so when she came out during the day, it was Qiwu who sent her out. However, she stayed a little longer today. When she came out, it was already very late. She was the only one left in the military department. Yan came out with a walking stick. Just as he was about to ask someone to find a carriage, he saw a person standing on the steps. She was wearing a bright moonlight-embroidered brocade robe. Standing in the snow, it seemed as if the snow was illuminated. "Xiaoju," Yan waved at him. He chuckled and walked up to them. "Why are you free today?" Yan waited for him to come closer before asking. If she was extremely busy in the military department, Xiaoju was even busier than her. "I know you haven't gone back yet, so I came to pick you up," he said. Yan hurriedly grabbed his arm. With one hand holding the walking stick, she hopped forward on one leg. She didn't think much of it. Her leg injury was actually much better, but she didn't know what Lin Shuanghe had said to Xiaoju to exaggerate. In short, Yan felt that her current life was like a cripple. She took 2 steps forward. Xiaoju suddenly stopped. Yan asked, "What's wrong?" His gaze fell on Yan's walking stick. After thinking for a while, he walked in front of Yan and squatted down slightly. "Come on up." You want to carry me on your back?" Yan asked. "Hurry up. That's not good." Yan hesitated for a while. "This is the military department. I have to work here every day. If someone sees this, it will damage my reputation. Everyone knows how brave and invincible I was in Jiuquan. If they look back, they will see that I even need someone to carry me. Wouldn't that be embarrassing? Are you coming up or not?" Yan said. "Yes, yes, yes." She pounced forward and wrapped her arms around Xiaoju's neck. Xiaoju easily carried her on his back. Xiaoju continued to carry her outside. Yan whispered in his ear, "Even if you don't care about my reputation, what about yours? Won't others say that although Do Wei's Commander Jadeface looks impressive, he is actually a henpecked husband at home? Lady He." Xiaoju's voice was very calm. "You don't have to speak when you don't want to," Yan said. "Are you admitting that you are a henpecked husband?" At times like this, Xiaoju was usually too lazy to bother with her. The wind blew in the night. It was very cold as they walked on the road. However, his back was warm and broad, as if it could support the entire future. Yan thought that Xiaoju was indeed better than He Yinsheng. If He Yinsheng had carried her for such a long distance, he would have scolded her and complained that she was heavy. "Military Governor Xiao," Yan's voice was soft. Her warm breath blew on his neck, tickling him. "Is this your first time carrying a girl?" Xiaoju's voice was very cold. "Are you a girl?" No one saw that the corners of his mouth were slightly curved, and his eyes were as moving as water. Am I not a girl? He Yan asked doubtfully. Then do you like a man? Xiao Ju did not say anything. Perhaps it was because He Yan had been with him for a long time, but his ability to annoy people had grown day by day. Sometimes Xiao Ju could not win against her in an argument, or perhaps he was too lazy to argue with her. She had won a round and was very proud of herself. The night was quiet. The snow and the moon were silvery white. One end of the street was quiet, while the other end of the street was connected to the night market. The lights were waning. They walked with their backs to the hustle and bustle. Along the way, the broken lights hanging under the eaves illuminated the snowy ground. Plum trees planted in people's backyards were blooming. They stretched out sparsely from the fences, trembling beautifully. The wind and snow came for no reason, but her mood was calm. On the way home, the night was beautiful. She laid on Xiao Ju's back and looked at the moon in the sky. She called out to him, Xiao Ju. He Yan responded within mem. She heard him say, what do you think the moon will be different from now in 10, 20, 50 years? Xiao Ju paused. I don't know. After a while he answered, I want to see how the moon will be different from now in a few decades. Xiao Ju looked up. The cold moon was like eyebrows, pear blossoms dotting the snow. The voice of the person on her back was gentle and quiet. When she laid on his back, it was reassuring. I want to know too. His gaze softened. Like the limpid autumn water, he said softly. So let's look at it together. Look at the moon together. 10, 20, 50 years? He Yan's lips slowly curled up. In the future, what would it be like? Maybe the streets would be different in 10 years. Maybe the snow would be colder in 20 years. Maybe she and Xiao Ju would be white-haired in 50 years. But the moon might not be different from tonight. Even if it was different, it did not matter. 10, 20, 50 years later, the mountains would be long and the rivers would be far away. She did not know the things of the world now, but she knew she would always like the moon. A snowflake landed on the hair of the person in front of her. He Yan gently brushed it away. She felt that it was much more normal. The moon was bright and the wind was gentle. Tonight was a good night. Let's go home. She smiled and urged him. Okay. The end of the text. Chapter 268. It was April in the capital, and the weather was getting warmer. By the riverbank, children were flying kites. The lines were very far away, and they were competing with each other to see whose kite was flying higher. Their laughter could be heard outside the long beach, and passers-by stopped to watch. Near the city gate, several carriages were parked. It seemed that some people were leaving the capital, and their relatives came to send them off. Right in front of the carriage, a young man wearing a long robe was rambling non-stop. If one listened carefully, it was all. The journey is long, so you must pay attention to your safety. Yao Yao hates bumps the most, so when you carry her, remember to wrap her in a blanket. He Yunsheng. The woman opposite him couldn't help but interrupt him. If you keep talking like this, we won't be able to leave when it's dark. That's right. The woman standing beside He Yunsheng glared at him and looked at He Yan. Sister, don't worry about going to Jiang. Yunsheng and I will take good care of the family. He Yan nodded and waved to Xiao Yao, who was being carried by Xiao Ju in the carriage, to He Yunsheng and Song Tao Tao. Xiao Yao shouted in a childish voice, Uncle, Aunt, goodbye. Be good on the road. He Yunsheng approached Xiao Yao and pinched her small face. He smiled. When we come back, Uncle will buy you candy. Xiao Yao bit her finger and smiled at him. Okay, you can go back, Xiao Ju said, we're leaving. The curtain of the carriage was lowered, and they rushed out of the city. Time passed quickly. It had been 7 years since the battle with Yudo. 7 years was enough for a young man to grow into an indomitable man. He Yunsheng was no longer the young and inexperienced boy who followed He Yan to the streets to sell large cakes. These years, his martial arts were outstanding, and he was willing to work hard. He was lucky enough to gain the favor of Emperor Zhaokong. Step by step, he steadily worked his way up. Now he had already become the deputy commander of the 5th Battalion. His official position was indeed promoted. When others looked at him, they felt that his temperament was arrogant and distant. But only He Yan knew that He Yunsheng was still the same worrywart as before. With such a temperament, It was hard for Song Taotao to take a fancy to him. He Yinxing and Song Taotao got married 4 years ago. Her marriage to He Yinxing was indeed beyond He Yan's expectations. After all, the person who had been engaged to Song Taotao back then was Cheng Lisu. However, back then Song Taotao and Cheng Lisu did not have any feelings for each other. After a few years, it was still the same. Later, the Song family and the Cheng family annulled the engagement. Originally, it was nothing. Who knew that as soon as the engagement was dissolved, Song Taotao ran to the door of the He family and bravely expressed her love for He Yinxing, which shocked everyone. Master Song was also a scholar. When he heard the news, he almost fainted from anger. Madame Song also felt that Song Taotao's actions were too outrageous. The only person who supported Song Taotao was her ex-fiancé, Cheng Lisu. Cheng Lisu secretly ran to the door of the Song family's house and encouraged her. "Not bad, Miss Song. You finally did something that I admire. Don't mind what others say. My brother, he is one of the top young talents in Shuajing. If you miss this village, you won't have this opportunity again. Don't give up just because of a few words from others. Don't worry, your ex-fiancé," he patted his chest and said righteously. "I will definitely help you get what you want." After encouraging Song Taotao, he went to find He Yinxing. He Yin once saw Cheng Lisu deceiving He Yinxing with his own eyes. "Uncle He, my ex-fiancé, although spoiled and willful, pretentious and fierce like a tiger, has nothing good about her. She's a good person. But in fact, her looks are passable. Her family is rich and more importantly, she is deeply in love with you. Why don't you try to get along with her? Who knows, maybe they'll develop feelings for each other as time passes." He Yinxing looked at him coldly. "Why don't you get along with her yourself?" "Hey," He Yinxing answered very sincerely. "A gentleman has the beauty to help others." He Yan, who accidentally heard the whole conversation, thought that Cheng Lisu was really a stick that wanted to see the world in chaos. He Yinxing didn't like Song Taotao at first. He Yan thought that he knew his brother quite well. According to his brother, the girl he liked should be a gentle and cute girl like Xia Qingxiu or Bai Rongwei. But at first, Song Taotao was the one who stuck to him, but he was stubborn and unmoved. Later on, Song Taotao didn't come to the He family's house. He Yinxing held it in for a long time. Finally, one day, he found He Yan. After being shy for a long time, he said that he wanted her to help him propose marriage to the Song family. He Yan didn't know what to say. From Xiaoju's niece-in-law to his sister-in-law, Song Taotao's identity was a little too big. He Yan didn't care about what other people said. He just sighed in his heart. Fate really didn't make any sense. Who would have known that at the very beginning, Song Taotao was originally her fiancé? Young people's affairs were hard to predict. Just let them be. After all, the goodies shouldn't flow into the fields of outsiders. Also, most men were people who didn't mean what they said. As for Cheng Lisu, she was still alone at the moment. Because of what happened with Song Taotao, his family didn't dare to arrange a marriage for him. But Cheng Lisu himself didn't take this matter to heart. Every day he was busy making friends and playing with cats and dogs. He was still the useless young master from before. At first, the Cheng family hoped that he would make progress, but later on, they were too lazy to care. In this world, having a big heart was a kind of happiness. The carriage shook. Xiao Yao hid in Xiao Ju's arms and stared at the scenery outside the carriage. She didn't cry or make a fuss. Her eyes were full of curiosity. He Yan snapped his fingers. She suddenly turned her head and stared at He Yan without blinking. Her eyes were wet. He Yan burst out laughing. "Xiaoju." He was so angry that he laughed. "What kind of mother are you? The road ahead is long." He Yan didn't think much of it. "If we don't find some fun for ourselves, it'll be boring." Xiao Yao was almost 3 years old. When she was born, Lin Shuanghe called his father and grandfather over and asked them to wait at the Xiao family's door in case an accident happened. Fortunately, Xiao Yao's birth went smoothly and He Yan did not suffer too much. The little fellow was also very obedient. Her temperament was not as lively as He Yan's, nor as calm as Xiao Ju's. He Yan felt that she was silly, like a little fool. She was very easy to take care of. She could be happy the whole day with a grasshopper. Because of this, she decided to bring Xiao Yao with her on this trip to Jiang. She was going to Jiang with Xiao Ju to attend Mu Xiaolo's wedding. When she first saved Mu Xiaolu from the hands of criminals in Jiang, Mu Xiaolu was only an 11-year-old girl. Now she was already a big girl. Not only that, Mu Hongjin also passed the position of princess to her. This time, Mu Hongjin sent an invitation to He Yan and his wife. She hoped that they would come to Jiang to attend the ceremony in person if they were free. Ever since Yudo was defeated, the way was peaceful. Other than training the soldiers and horses, they didn't have much to do every day. He Yan and Xiao Ju asked for leave from Emperor Zhaokong and took Xiao Yao to Jiang. He Yan thought that if Lu Buwang was still alive, he would want to see Mu Hongjin's granddaughter enter a new life. Since Lu Buwang was gone, she would take care of her granddaughter for him. Moreover, she also missed her friends in Jiang. The carriage drove outside the city. There were people selling peaches on the road, so the carriage in front stopped. He Yan heard Lin Shuangha's voice outside. "Hey younger sister He, it's a long journey. Buy 2 peaches to eat." Fei Nu stopped the carriage in front. He Yan got off the carriage. Lin Shuangha was standing in front of the peach selling peaches, carefully picking the fresh peaches in the bamboo basket. He Yan wanted to laugh when he saw this. She leaned against the carriage and said, "Didn't you say that you don't eat the peddler's food outside?" Lin Shuangha pretended not to hear her, and changed the topic. "These peaches look good. Buy some for Yao Yao to try." 7 years had passed. Lin Shuangha had changed from an elegant white-clothed young master to an elegant white-clothed young master, who was 7 years older. In fact, there wasn't much difference in appearance. His extravagant personality had never changed. However, 7 years ago, after the Great Battle of Yudo, he was depressed for half a year after returning to the Shuo capital. Later, he opened a medical center in the Shuo capital. The Lin family had many medical centers, but the one he opened was special. Because he didn't treat people, he only taught medicine. The doctors in the Shuo capital who were obsessed with medicine often went to his medical center to study together. In these few years, he had come up with many new recipes. Although Lin Shuangha's fame couldn't be compared to Lin Qingtan, he had gradually surpassed Lin Mu. He had some achievements in medicine, but his marriage had always been a headache for the Lin family. Although Cheng Lisu was unwilling to get married, she was still younger than Lin Shuangha. Lin Shuangha was already Cheng Lisu's uncle. His classmates, such as Xiao Ju, could even run on the ground with their children. He was the only one who was still single, but to say that he was cold and aloof, he couldn't be considered pitiful. All the women in the capital were his little sisters. His medical center was very lively every day. He probably hadn't met a woman who could truly make him fall in love, so he didn't force it. He Yan walked to Lin Shuangha's side and picked peaches with him. The peaches were pink and fresh, sweet just by looking at them. She picked a few and sighed. If only Qing Mei was here. Qing Mei is the best at picking these fruits. Don't. Lin Shuangha didn't even think about it before replying. 1 Xiao Huaijin is enough. Do you want me to stay here and watch the master and servant take care of the child together? Then he face-bombed. I didn't think that some men would be like this after becoming fathers. After Xiao Ju had Xiao Yao, whenever they were outside, she wouldn't let go of Xiao Yao. She was also very obedient to Xiao Yao. This wasn't a big deal. In any case, Xiao Yao had a gentle temperament and was easier to take care of. Qi Wu's stinky brat was also a big deal. He caused trouble all day long and was extremely naughty. Every time Qing Mei got angry, she would chase him around the courtyard with a wooden stick, causing chaos every time. However, Qi Wu still wanted to protect him. He said, "The child is still young and doesn't know any better. Don't be so fierce. Put down the wooden stick. If you have something to say, we can talk." The result of this kind of situation was usually Qing Mei beating him up as well. He Yan sometimes sighed in amazement. She really didn't think that the weak servant girl who used to cry all the time could be so valiant now. Qing Mei married Qi Wu 3 years after the Battle of Yichuo. He Yan always joked about Qing Mei before, but he didn't really take it to heart. Qing Mei liked who she wanted to marry and who she wanted to marry. In the end, it all depended on Qing Mei's own thoughts. However, the two of them were still fated to be together. Both of them liked each other, so it was only natural for them to be together. At first, He Yan planned to let Qing Mei and Qi Wu go together on this trip to Jiang. However, at this critical moment, They found out that Qing Mei was pregnant and couldn't travel too far. He Yan asked Qing Mei to rest well in the residence, and Qi Wu to accompany her. He Yan picked a few peaches. After Lin Shuanghe paid for them, she washed the peaches with clean water from the wooden bucket next to the peddler and returned to her carriage. Here. She handed the peaches to Xiao Ju. Try it. Xiao Ju took the peaches, peeled them with a knife, and fed them to Xiao Yao. Xiao Yao ate a little and became happy. She said in a childish voice, "I want more." Ian was speechless. Sometimes, she felt that her and Xiao Ju's positions as parents were reversed. She taught Xiao Yao how to walk and even taught her how to hold small stones. She planned to teach her martial arts when Xiao Yao was older, while Xiao Ju took care of all the minor details. For example, what Xiao Yao ate, what she wore, what she played. When it came to taking care of children, the patience he displayed was comparable to Xia Qingxiu. Mu Xia was already 7 years old. He looked a lot like Yan He. Among his peers he was considered to be taller, although his father had already passed away when he was born, but luckily everyone in the Yan family, as well as Yan He's friends, gave him enough care so that he did not have any inferiority complex or resentment. He was very lively and had a strong desire to win. His archer and horsemaster said that his equestrian skills still needed to be improved, so he trained hard for a full 3 months until he obtained first place in the academy examinations. The last time he saw Wuxia, the young lad held a long sword and arrogantly said to Xiao Ju, "Military Governor Xiao, in a few years, you will be defeated by this young master." He Yan, who was watching from the side, could not help but laugh. Yan Wuxia looked up and saw her. He snorted. "What are you laughing at, including you?" He Yan felt that this young lad with a high ponytail, silver robe and long spear was exactly the same as Yan He in the past. Xia Qingxiu laughed. "His character is like this. I have told him many times but he did not change. Don't mind him." "No, he is very cute," He Yan also laughed. "Wuxia is very similar to brother Yan." Xia Qingxiu lowered his head. "Yes, everyone says so." He Yan felt that Yan Wuxia's character was very good. At least he was lively and could bring Xia Qingxiu a lot of comfort. Other than taking care of Yan Wuxia, Xia Qingxiu also went to the academy to help. A few years ago, a new female academy was set up in the Shuo capital. It was run by Wei Xuanzhang's wife, Wei Foran, and Zhaokong Emperor agreed. Now that there was a female general like Marquis Wuan in the imperial court, in the next few years, when Yong Su Tang nurtured a group of talented and ambitious girls, who knows if there would be female officials. Although it was slow, it was getting better little by little. He Xining also helped in Yong Su Tang. After Wei Xuanzhang's death, He Xining accompanied Wei Foran every day and built a deep relationship with Wei Foran. Wei Foran accepted her as her goddaughter. She was a teacher teaching the zither in Yong Su Tang. Every day, she was with young girls and became more cheerful and open-minded. She was no longer as obsessed with the past as before. He Yan also often went to see her. He heard that there was a young teacher teaching abacus in Yong Su Tang who secretly admired He Xining very much. He Yan ordered people to investigate the background of that teacher. He was a righteous person. However, He Xining had to ask herself what she thought. There was still a long way to go, so there was no hurry. After Xiao Yao ate the peach, she fell asleep on Xiao Ju's body. He Yan asked in a low voice, "Are you tired? Do you want me to hold you for a while?" Xiao Ju shook her head. "I'm not tired." He Yan looked at Xiao Yao, who was hanging on his body, and sighed in his heart. As expected of her, she could eat and sleep and was especially easy to take care of. She lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked outside. Outside, at the end of the river, the banks were green and the sun was warm. As she looked, she felt a wave of laziness. She leaned on Xiao Ju's shoulder and unknowingly fell asleep like the little girl in Xiao Ju's arms. 7 years later, Jiang City did not seem to have changed much compared to 7 years ago. At the city gate, Cui Yuji, who had received the news, rushed over early in the morning. When He Yan and the others got off the carriage, the first thing they saw was Cui Yuji and his 4 concubines. Cui Yuji still looked the same. He was round and chubby, simple and honest, but he was a little older. Eldest concubine and 4th concubine each held a child in their arms. These were Cui Yuji's son and daughter, Cui Yan and Cui Yingying, who were born to eldest concubine and fourth concubine respectively. Second concubine was still as charming and beautiful as before. Third concubine coughed weakly every time she took a few steps. There were not many changes either. He Yan walked in front of them and pinched Cui Yingying's cheeks. Her cheeks were soft and comparable to Xiao Yao's. He smiled and said, "Lord Cui, this is Yaner and Yingying." Cui Yuji said proudly, "How is it?" "Everyone says that the two of them look more and more like military governor Xiao." "I think they do." He Yan. Although he admitted that Cui Yan and Cui Yingying had delicate features and did not look like Cui Yuji, he did not think that they would be related to Xiao Ju. Cui Yuji's eyes lit up when he saw Xiao Yao in Xiao Ju's arms. "Aya, this must be Xiao Yao. She's so cute. She and Yan are a golden couple. How about?" Xiao Ju blocked his hand that was about to reach out. She glanced at him coldly and said calmly, "Cui Yuji." Second concubine hurriedly held Cui Yuji and said with a smile, "Master, you really like to joke. Miss Xiao is still young." Xiao Yao looked at Cui Yuji in confusion, then looked at Xiao Ju. Finally, she reached out to He Yan and asked for a hug. "Mother." He Yan carried her over. Lin Shuanghe stood up and coughed softly. "This is not the place to talk. Master Cui, let's go back to the residence first." Cui Yuji's residence was huge. He stayed in the Cui residence like last time when he came to Jiang. However, when he came back last time, He Yan and Xiao Ju still had a clear superior-subordinate relationship. Now that they were going back to their old home and were already husband and wife, they even brought along a little child. It was really unpredictable. He Yan walked behind with Xiao Yao in his arms. He looked at Cui Yuji curiously and asked softly, "Since first concubine and fourth concubine have already given birth to Master Cui's children, why are they still Master Cui's concubines? If that's the case, won't young Master Cui and young Miss Cui become illegitimate children?" She originally thought that since Cui Yuji only had 4 concubines, he might still marry a wife in the end. However, after so many years he did not marry. Even his concubines had given birth to children. He Yan did not understand. "Master Xiao He, you don't know," Cui Yuji said with a smile. "Jiang and the Central Plains have different customs. Women in Jiang rarely remarry once they get married. If something happens to their husband's family, and they are unfortunate enough to be widowed, they have to be widowed for the rest of their lives. As a cavalry officer, I don't know when I will die in my early years. Marrying a wife is a hindrance to others. Concubines are different. Even if I die, they can still find a place to live. Who knows that I have a good life? I have lived well all these years. However, I am also used to the 4 of them. If one of them becomes the main wife, will there still be peaceful days in the courtyard? This is also quite good." Cui Yuji sighed. "I treat everyone equally. Everyone is my favorite. They are all illegitimate children, so there is no difference between them." He Yan had nothing to say. He could only say that Cui Yuji was indeed a man who had walked Lover's Bridge 4 times. Although his perspective was strange, he had his own logic. When they arrived at the Cui residence, a middle-aged housekeeper came to welcome them. Lin Shuanghe asked, "Where is Zhong Fu?" He remembered that the last time he came to the Cui residence, the housekeeper was an old servant with white hair. Zhong Fu passed away a year ago. Cui Yuji said. "He was old and passed away in his dreams. This is Zhong Fu's son Zhong Gui." He Yan was a little absent-minded. It was only at this moment that he truly felt that 7 years had passed. No matter how similar Jiang was to the past, it was not 7 years ago. Cui Yuji had already ordered people to clean the courtyard before they came. He Yan and the others settled the things. Xiao Yao was already asleep. He Yan placed her on the bed and covered her with a blanket. He looked around the room and suddenly remembered that she was looking at the spring pictures that Cui Yuji had painstakingly arranged for them in front of this bed. Xiao Ju glanced at her and saw He Yan standing by the bed with a thoughtful smile. She raised her eyebrows and said, "Lady He, are you regretting that Cui Yuji did not put the pictures here this time?" He Yan came back to his senses and shook his head. "How can that be? After all, Yao Yao is still here. Lord Cui still knows his limits." She really showed a regretful expression, as if she had not had enough. Xiao Ju was angry and amused at the same time. Although Xiao Yao was almost 3 years old, He Yan's skin was getting thicker and thicker by the day. Perhaps it was because he was training new recruits in the martial arts field, and spent all day with those youths. He was getting bolder and bolder, and he had fewer misgivings. She saw that Xiao Yao was sleeping soundly and whispered, "I'm a little hungry. Let the maidservant come over and look after Yao Yao. Let's go eat something first." Xiaoju nodded. The Chui residence's food was as exquisite as usual. During the meal, Yan talked about Mu Xiaolu's husband. Chui Yuji said, "I've seen the eldest son of the Qin family. He's handsome and has good skills. Previously, when the little highness sneaked out to play, she encountered bad people. It was the eldest son of the Qin family who saved her. The little highness has good taste. In Jiang City, a handsome man like the eldest son of the Qin family is rare." When Chui Yuji looked at people, he would first look at their appearance. However, Yan also knew that there was nothing wrong with this eldest son of the Qin family. She had ordered Bai Xian to investigate. A few years ago, Luaning had been injured while on a mission. It was not good for her to work everywhere. Coincidentally, Bai Xian had grown up and took over Luan Ying's job. He had a lively personality and completed his mission very well. He also liked Yan very much, especially Yan's embroidery. Every once in a while, he would ask Yan for one. There was a period of time when he asked too much, which made Xiaoju unhappy. She found an opportunity to send him to a place far away to do some work. Yan did not like needlework, but in this world, it was not easy to meet someone who appreciated her. Especially when Bai Xian praised her needlework from the bottom of his heart every time, Yan would try his best to satisfy Bai Xian's requests. According to Bai Xian's information, this young master of the Qin family was an upright gentleman, and a good man who could be entrusted with her life. In Xiaoju's opinion, Yan was worrying for nothing. After all, Mu Xiaolu was going to get married. Mu Hongjin would definitely have investigated the background of the eldest son of the Qin family a long time ago. However, Yan always felt that Mu Xiaolu was the grandson of Lu Buwang's lover. It was reasonable for her to do her best. At the wedding banquet tomorrow, you will see what he looks like. As Chui Yuji spoke, he sighed. The little highness has grown up now. His decisive appearance is exactly the same as his highness in the past. We old men are also old. In the future, it will be the young people's world. Second concubine said sweetly, "Master is not old. It's called being upright and prudent." Yan, what a good upright and prudent. After the meal, they chatted for a while. Xiao Yao also woke up. First concubine ordered the kitchen to make food suitable for children. Yan and Xiaoju fed Xiao Yao. When Xiao Yao was full, they played with her. When the sky darkened, Fourth Yinyang knocked on the door. Yan walked out and heard Fourth Yinyang say, "Miss He, this concubine will go to Shui City later to buy the red silk that will be tied to the congratulatory gift tomorrow. Would you like to go and pick some together? The red silk of Jiang is not the same as the one in the Central Plains." Yan turned his head and asked Xiaoju, "Do you want to go with me? There are too many people. It's inconvenient for Yao Yao." After a pause, Xiaoju said, "You go. I'll come find you after I coax her to sleep." Xiao Yao always needed someone to coax her before she slept. At first, it was Yan who coaxed her, until one day, Xiaoju heard her telling Xiao Yao a bedtime story. A heroine chopped off a bandit's head with a knife. The head rolled in front of the heroine. Xiao Yao blinked and stared at her, listening with great interest. After that, Xiaoju did not let Yan coax Xiao Yao to sleep. Yan said to fourth concubine, "All right, we'll go first." Fourth concubine smiled and said, "All right." Jiang City's Shui City was still bustling with activity. The Water God Festival had passed, but the peddlers and merchants did not leave. In the past 2 years, Jiang City's city pass was more open than before. Many merchants came to Jiang to do business, and Shui City became more and more prosperous. Goods from the western regions to Jiangnan could be seen. Fourth concubine was the youngest, about the same age as Yan. As they walked, she explained to Yan, "The city is different from before." "Does Lord Xiao He also feel that it's much more lively than before?" Yan sighed. "That's true." On the river, boats of all sizes were brightly lit, illuminating both sides of the river as if it was daytime. The peddlers worked hard to sell their goods. Ian walked and stopped. Occasionally he saw something new, so he bought it with the intention of giving it to Xiao Yao to play with later. She was no longer a poor soldier. In any case, she had a salary. Just the reward she received from the battle that year were enough to fill her courtyard. In the past few years, although her purse was not full, it was not as flat as a pancake like it used to be. As the two of them walked, from time to time, youths from Jiang would pass by. They could not help but glance at Hien. Hien noticed their gazes and asked fourth concubine, "Is there something on my face?" Fourth concubine giggled and explained, "That's not it, Lord Xiaohe. They admire Lord Xiaohe because of his good looks." Hien covered his mouth with his hand and coughed softly. "You flatter me." Fourth concubine smiled but did not say anything. The men of Jiang could not tell the difference between the hairstyles of women in the Central Plains and young girls. They could only see that this young girl's eyebrows were lively and elegant, like a cool breeze. Naturally, they would admire her. After all, everyone loved beauty. However, he didn't know how second young mistress Xiao grew up. 7 years had passed, but time didn't leave any traces of aging on her body. Looking at her appearance, there wasn't much difference from before, but there was a slight difference. It was probably that in the heroic spirit between her eyebrows, there was a hint of gentleness. This gentleness combined well with her straightforwardness. When she walked in the crowd, she was like a shining pearl that was difficult to ignore. Hien saw that there were people gathered in front of him. He took 2 steps forward and saw a vendor sitting in front of an iron pot. He skillfully scooped up the brown sugar in the pot and drew on the white stone slab. He immediately exclaimed happily, "It's a sugar figurine." "Are there no sugar figurines in the Shuo capital?" Fourth concubine was curious as to why she was so excited. "There are, but they are not as beautiful as the ones made by the masters in Jiang City. There are also not so many types." Hien smiled and said, "Since I'm here, I'll buy one. I'll bring it back for Yao Yao to eat later." She said to fourth concubine, "There are too many people. Wait for me here. I'll come back once I'm done." Fourth concubine wanted to say something, but she saw that Hien had already pushed through the crowd and was heading towards the vendor who was buying the sugar figurines. Hien squeezed to the front and took out a string of copper coins. She said, "Little brother, I want a big tiger. Please make it look more impressive." "Okay." The vendor was very skillful. In just a moment, a big, impressive tiger was stuck on a bamboo stick. Hien handed over the money and took the sugar figurine with one hand. She looked very satisfied. Previously, Qingmei had made a cloth tiger for Xiao Yao. Xiao Yao liked it very much. She hugged it when she ate and slept. Later, she accidentally left the cloth tiger in the brazier and burned it. Xiao Yao cried for half a day. Before Qingmei finished making a new one, Hien and the others had to set off for Jiang again. Xiao Yao liked tigers so much. She should be happy to see the tiger made of sugar. Hien squeezed out of the crowd with the sugar tiger in her hand. Just as she was about to leave, she suddenly heard someone call her name from behind. The person seemed to be a little hesitant and uncertain. She said, "Ahi?" Hien scratched her head and saw a man dressed in green standing not far from her. He looked surprised and complicated. 2. Fourth Young Master Chu? Chapter 269. Among the crowd, the man in the green robe with wide sleeves was like a magnificent scene in spring, making the night seem gentler. Ian never thought that he would meet Chu Zhao here. His face was gentle and elegant, and his expression was as gentle as ever. Compared to many years ago, he had become thinner. However, there seemed to be something missing between his eyebrows. He was like a pearl that had lost its brilliance, silent and peaceful. Ian walked 2 steps towards him. After standing still, he asked, "Fourth Young Master Chu, why are you here?" After the crown prince was punished and the 4th prince ascended the throne, there was no news of Chu Zhao. It was said that someone had seen him outside the city and guessed that he had left Shuajing. After Emperor Zhaokong ascended the throne, he intended to clean up Su Jingfu's old subordinates. Naturally, the Chu family was one of the families that were suppressed. In these years, the Chu family had almost declined. Chu Linfeng had even dismissed his 19 concubines and relied on Madame Chu's family to survive. As for Chu Zhao, everyone gradually forgot about him. After all, Prime Minister Su seemed to be a name from a long, long time ago. The handsome and brave youths of the capital emerged year after year. In the dreams of the women of the Great Way, the two brothers of the Xiao family had already married and had children. The fourth young master of the Chu family, who was like an orchid, was also like a beautiful dream in a wild valley. After appearing briefly, he disappeared into the river of time. However, he appeared again at this moment. In an instant, He Yan felt as if he had returned to the Jiang of many years ago. Chu Zhao smiled and said, I have always been in Jiang. He Yan was silent. If he was in Jiang, it was understandable that no one in the world could find his whereabouts. However, perhaps it was not that the emperor could not be found. It was better for him to be here. He Yan could not describe his feelings towards Chu Zhao. Although he was Su Jingfu's student, he had never really hurt him back then. It was nothing more than different standpoints. He Yan knew that Chu Zhao was quite a scheming person, and was not as harmless as he appeared on the surface. But many years had passed, and the love and hatred had gradually faded. When they met again here, they could not be considered friends, nor could they be considered enemies. They were just an old acquaintance. She noticed that the beautiful and charming maidservant was no longer by Chu Zhao's side. She had already expected this. She paused for a moment before she asked, Fourth young master Chu, what are you doing in Jiang now? I opened a calligraphy and painting shop here to make a living, Chu Zhao answered with a smile. Eh? Why did you suddenly come to Jiang? Her Highness is getting married. My family and I are here to attend the ceremony. Ian did not hide anything. Mu Xiaolo's wedding was a big event in Jiang City. Everyone in Jiang City knew about it. Is military governor Xiao here too? He asked. He Yan nodded. Chu Zhao smiled and looked at He Yan. The woman in front of him still had a cheerful expression. He had met many people and many women later on, but she was the only one who had such a magnanimous and lively expression. His gaze fell on the sugar tiger in He Yan's hand. He was stunned for a moment before he asked softly, does he have a child? Yes, He Yan said. He has a daughter. She's almost 4 years old now. Her name is Xiaoyao. Xiaoyao? Isn't the name I gave her very nice? He Yan said proudly. I don't have any requirements for her. As long as she's safe and healthy and lives a carefree life, I'll be satisfied. She did not have any talent in poetry and songs. However, everyone agreed that the name Xiaoyao was good. White clouds cover the vast Jianghu, allowing me to travel freely. Chu Zhao looked at her and smiled. He is very good at naming things. Thank you. He Yan smiled and asked, Fourth young master Chu, do you have a sweetheart now? Back then, Chu Zhao had tricked her into coming out in the middle of the night, and confessed to her in a very mushy way. In the end, Xiao Ju was furious and she had to coax her for a long time. Now that things had changed, she had let go of many things. Although he was fourth young master Chu, he was only Chu Zhao now. Fourth young master Chu would confess to her because of benefits and his position. Who would the real Chu Zhao have a sweetheart? He was so smart and talented. No matter what, there would be no shortage of people who would like him. Chu Zhao was stunned for a moment. He lowered his head and smiled. Not everyone is as lucky as military governor Xiao. He Yan was about to speak when suddenly, someone's voice sounded. What are you doing here? She turned around and saw Xiao Ju walking over from the night. Her face was cold and her gaze was like a knife. Military Governor Xiao. Chu Zhao was also surprised. He smiled and said, Long time no see. Fourth concubine, who was standing in front of a cosmetics stall, was trembling in fear. He Yan had gone to buy sweets and met a handsome young master after buying them. The two of them stood to the side and talked. This was nothing. Perhaps they had met an old acquaintance. However, fourth concubine could tell that something was wrong. Second young mistress Zhao's expression was open and magnanimous. However, the handsome young master's gaze seemed to have feelings for second young mistress Xiao. However, it was not the kind of infatuation. How should she describe it? It was as if he had once loved her deeply, but was abandoned. Fourth concubine had been with second concubine for a long time, and believed that she had developed a good eye. She only hated that she did not have a plate of melon seeds. Otherwise, she could sit here and eat for a few hours. A handsome young master who was frustrated in love was generally lovable, just as fourth concubine's imagination was running wild, wondering what kind of entanglement the two of them had in the past, and how second young mistress Xiao had betrayed this handsome young man. She suddenly felt a shadow appear beside her. When she looked up, she was almost scared out of her wits. Military Governor Xiao had arrived at some point. He stood beside her and calmly looked at the two people in the distance. His eyes narrowed slightly. Fourth concubine swore that she saw Military Governor Zhao's fingers turn slightly white as they pressed against the sword at his waist. Many of the men in Jiang City, who were jealous of each other, would fight over the girl they loved. This was nothing. However, looking at that gentle and weak young master dressed in cyan, she was afraid that he would be beaten to death by Military Governor Xiao and second young mistress Xiao. She had heard that the people of the Central Plains placed great importance on women. She did not know if second young mistress Xiao would be able to bear the crime of having an affair. Fourth concubine wanted to remind him, but she was afraid of the pressure from the person beside her. In the end, she took 2 steps back. However, when second young mistress Xiao said something in front of him, the young master dressed in cyan looked even more dejected. Immediately after, Military Governor Xiao walked up to him. The moment He Yan saw Xiaoju appear, he cursed in his heart. He did not know why, but every time this person appeared in this kind of situation, it was especially coincidental. Back then he had a grudge against Chu Zhao. After so many years, looking at his current expression, he was afraid that he would not be magnanimous. I was here to buy sweets and coincidentally met fourth young master Chu. We exchanged a few words. He Yan explained tactfully. We only exchanged a few words before you came. Xiaoju only glanced at Chu Zhao before her gaze fell on He Yan. She said, let's go. 2 words, each word was chilling. He Yan said goodbye to Chu Zhao. Then fourth young master Chu, will be leaving first. Chu Zhao smiled and nodded. He watched He Yan and Xiaoju leave until they could no longer be seen in the crowd. Only then did he withdraw his gaze. The water in Jiang was still clear. He thought that after so many years, his heart had long been like still water. However, the moment he saw her, he realized that he had never let go. However, this was all he could do. The sweets vendor was crowded with a lively crowd. The young master dressed in cyan walked in, lowered his eyes and said softly, Little brother, I want a flower basket. Xiaoju walked very quickly. He Yan followed behind her. He felt a headache coming on. He called out, Wait, Xiaoju, fourth concubine is still behind. She has already gone back. He Yan, ? Fourth concubine was actually so disloyal. She just threw a firecracker in front of him. She even had to coax him herself. He Yan caught up with Xiaoju in a few steps. He didn't care whether he was willing or not or what expression he had. He grabbed his arm and said, Xiaoju, why? Aren't you going to continue catching up with your fourth young master Chu? He said mockingly. We're not catching up. We're just greeting each other. He Yan thought that Xiaoju and Chu Zhao probably had some ill-fated relationship in their previous lives. The moment they met Chu Zhao, he was especially excited. There were 3 precautions in life: fire, theft, and Chu Zhao. No matter how capable I am, I can't predict the future. He Yan looked at him. I also didn't expect that he would be in Jiang City now. Do you think the emperor knows about this? Xiaoju sneered. He knew about it a long time ago. Although he had already vaguely guessed it, He Yan still sighed when Xiaoju said it out loud. Since Chu Zhao had entered Jiang City, he probably wouldn't be able to leave in the future. He would be imprisoned here for the rest of his life. However, for him, this might not be a bad ending. Xiaoju sneered when she saw his expression. You're really worried about him. Here we go again. He Yan felt helpless and could only say, Eldest brother, it's been so many years. Why are you still brooding? I miss you all the time. Look. She took the opportunity to put the sugar tiger in her hand next to his mouth. I spent a lot of money to buy this sugar figurine for you. I'll give it to you as an apology. Xiaoju brushed her hand away. He was amused by her ability to lie without batting an eyelid. He said, You're not even willing to lie to people anymore? Who's lying to you? Do you want me to stand on the roof and shout? He Yan, like military governor Xiao the most. We've seen pictures together. He Yan giggled and said, "You clearly know in your heart." Xiao Ju looked at her for a long time and finally admitted defeat. Forget it. Anyway, she always had 1,000 different ways to coax people, even if sometimes her coaxing wasn't very sincere. He warned, "I'll let it go this time. Yan, if you meet him privately again." Yan thought, "She's talking as if I come to Jiang often. After this, who knows when I'll come here again." However, Xiao Ju glanced at the sugar figurine in her hand. "I don't accept this apology." "Then how do you want to apologize?" Yan raised his eyebrows and stared at her without saying a word. Yan was speechless. She gritted her teeth and said, "Xiao Ju, you're just coveting my beauty and my body." Xiao Ju hummed and replied smoothly, "That's right." Yan was speechless. That night was another muddle-headed night. The next morning, Xiao Yao woke up. The sugar tiger had already melted into a puddle of sugar water. Yan held a bare bamboo stick and said seriously in front of Xiao Yao, "Old tiger, do you see this? This is a tiger." Xiao Yao looked at him with a confused expression. Xiao Ju walked in from outside and saw that she was teasing Xiao Yao again. He was speechless for a moment before he walked over and picked Xiao Yao up. He said, "It's time to eat." The Cui family's breakfast was sumptuous as usual. After breakfast, Cui Yuezhi had to go to the imperial palace to help. The customs of Jiang City were different from those of the Central Plains. Xiao Ju took care of the younger ones, and did not forget to push Yan's favorite dishes in front of him. Fourth concubine, who was passing by, saw this and was stunned for a moment. After breakfast, she secretly pulled Yan to the side and hesitated for a moment before she whispered, "Second young mistress Xiao, can you teach me a thing or two about your husband-controlling technique?" Yan almost thought that he had misheard her. She asked, "What technique did you say?" "The technique of controlling a husband." Fourth concubine said somewhat embarrassedly, "Last night, it wasn't that I wanted to leave first. It was just that Governor Xiao was already here, and I didn't want to disturb him. I definitely didn't abandon you on purpose." However, at that time, Military Governor Xiao didn't look too happy. This morning he seemed to be the same as before. "I just wanted to ask, how did you do it?" "How did she do it?" "You would have to ask her waist." Yan laughed awkwardly. "Actually, I don't have any husband-controlling technique." "How is that possible?" Fourth concubine was anxious. "I still remember what you said to Miss Ling and the others in the residence that year. After so many years, second young mistress's husband-controlling technique must have improved a lot. If you teach me a thing or two, I guarantee that I won't teach it to outsiders." "You won't teach it to outsiders? Do you really think it's a secret manual?" Yan never thought that the nonsense he made up in the Cui residence that year would be used as a classic by others. However, when he met fourth concubine's thirsty gaze, Yan did not want to disappoint her. He began to talk. "The husband-controlling technique seems to be controlling, but it's actually letting go. You have a balance between tension and relaxation. You're neither close nor distant. Sometimes you're as cold as ice, and sometimes you're as passionate as a woman. Ahem, perhaps you'll be able to control it, and practice makes perfect." "Have a balance between tension and relaxation?" Fourth concubine murmured. Yan patted her shoulder. "Take your time to think about it. I'll leave first." She ran off as if she was escaping, leaving fourth concubine standing there alone and carefully feeling it. When they returned to the room, Lin Shuanghe was standing at the door. When he saw Yan, he urged, "Younger sister He, where did you run off to? We have to go to the prince's residence immediately. The wedding hasn't started yet, so let's go see Her Highness the Princess first." Yan hurriedly agreed. After quickly packing up, they took the carriage and followed Cui Yuezhi to the prince's residence. Perhaps it was because of Mu Xiaolo's wedding, but the prince's residence now looked much livelier than before. There were lanterns and colored banners everywhere, and there were cut-she characters pasted everywhere. Thus, the originally empty and desolate prince's residence became luxurious and grand. As soon as they entered, a maidservant greeted them with a smile. "Lord Cui, Military Governor Xiao, Lord He, Young Master Lin. Her Highness is already waiting for you." Yan and the others followed the maidservant inside. When they reached the main hall, they heard a laughing voice. You're here. He Yan raised his eyes to look. Mu Hongjin walked out from the back of the hall. She was wearing the ceremonial robes of the Jiang royal family. Today was Mu Xiaolu's wedding, so she naturally wore red. However, this red was different from the warm red of the past. It was a bit darker, which made her face not as dignified and cold as before, but more gentle. The woman's long hair was tied up in a bun behind her head. She didn't wear a crown. She was no longer the princess, so she only wore a dark red velvet flower. Her eyes were still beautiful, but if one looked closely, there were still white spots in her bun. She was older and gentler. When she looked at them, it was as if she was looking at an old friend who had been separated for a long time. There was a hint of joy in her eyes. Your Highness. He Yan and the others bowed to her. This place hasn't been so lively for a long time. I'm very happy that you can come to Xiaolu's wedding, she said. Lin Shuanghe smiled and said, It's been a long time since we last met. Your Highness is still as beautiful as before. His ability to make women happy had improved a lot over the years. Mu Hongjin let out a pft, and then shook her head. Stroking the hair on one side of her temple, she sighed and said, I'm getting old. What kind of heavenly beauty is this? Her gaze was attracted by Xiao Yao in Xiao Zhu's arms. She softly said, This is Governor Zhao's daughter? How old is she this year? Ian said, Her name is Xiao Yao. She's almost 3 years old. Mu Hongjin reached out to Xiao Yao. Xiao Yao hesitated for a while before reaching out her chubby arms, indicating that she could hug her. Mu Hongjin held her in her arms. Xiao Yao seemed to be very close to her. She giggled and shouted, Auntie. Then she kissed Mu Hongjin's face. He Yan thought that if Lu Buwang and Mu Hongjin didn't have a strange combination of factors, he might have called Mu Hongjin Grand Master. However, he called her Auntie, which was too different in terms of seniority. However, Mu Hongjin didn't care about Xiao Yao calling her that. Instead, she seemed very happy. She took off a gemstone ring from her finger and stuffed it into Xiao Yao's hand. She said, Since you call me Auntie, I should give Yao Yao a gift. Do you like this? Xiao Yao's eyes lit up. She nodded desperately and said in a crisp voice, I like it. Ian couldn't bear to look at her. Xiao Yao was considered the pearl in the Xiao family's palm. They usually gave her a lot of food and drinks. How could she be such a money grubber? It was embarrassing. Mu Hongjin held Xiao Yao in her arms and was talking to them. Not long after, another guard came and said, Your Highness, the people of the Qin family are coming. He Yan found this guard familiar, and couldn't help but take a few more glances. Cui Yuezhi said with a smile, Second young mistress Xiao, do you still know Mu Yi? Mui? He Yan recalled that during the Battle of Jiang, she had fought side by side with a soldier from Jiang City called Mu Yi. Before she left, the young man had given her a wooden painting. She had kept the wooden painting well even now. However, the Mu Yi in front of her was very different from the Mu Yi of that year. His immaturity and childishness had all faded away. He now looked like a mature man. However, after Mu Yi saw He Yan, his maturity and steadiness quickly dissipated. He became hesitant and excited, as if he wanted to look but didn't dare to. He was inexplicably a little shy. Cui Yuezhi said, Mu Yi is now the personal guard commander of His Highness in the mansion. He is no longer the young boy of that year. Mu Yi, do you still remember second young mistress Xiao, Miss He of that year? Mu Yi scratched his head and whispered, I remember. Xiao Zhu coldly looked at the two of them. Lin Shuanghe coughed a few times and quickly changed the topic. He didn't want the young guard commander to bump into second young master Zhao's reverse scale. He only pretended to be curious and asked, What about His Highness? We've been here for so long, but we haven't seen His Highness. Back then, His Highness didn't even reach my chest. I wonder how much taller he has grown. Mu Hongjin smiled and said, Go and take a look. Why isn't Xiao Lu here yet? As they were talking, a woman's voice came from behind the hall. Grandmother, what's the hurry? Aren't I here now? The woman who walked out from behind was dressed in a wedding dress that was as red as fire. The dress was made by the best embroiderers in Jiang City, and was decorated with fine tassels and bells. When she walked, the jingling sounds could be heard. The hem of the dress was extremely long and looked like a blooming flower. Compared to the wedding dress, The woman's face was even more gorgeous. The golden crown accentuated her fair and small face. She was born very similar to Mu Hongjin. The corners of her eyes were painted red, exquisite and eye-catching. However, compared to Mu Hongjin, she was more willful and lively. At first glance, it was obvious that she was a wild girl who grew up in Jiang City. When she saw He Yan and the others, a trace of joy flitted across her eyes. However, she still had to put on an arrogant attitude and pretended to be indifferent as she said, "You've come. It's been many years since we last met. His Highness has grown into a big girl." Lin Shuanghe looked at her and felt gratified as a father. However, he soon sighed and said, "I didn't expect that even though His Highness has gotten married, I'm still alone." Mu Hongjin smiled and said, "If Sir Lin feels lonely, why don't you stay in Jiang City for a while? There are many good girls in the city. Perhaps you'll be fated to meet Sir Lin. Things like fate can't be forced." Lin Shuanghe opened his fan and said, "Moreover, my ambition doesn't lie here. If I meet him, I'll be lucky. If not, I'll be fated to meet him. The heavens have their own plans. There's no need to rush." Mu Hongjin said, "Sir Lin is open-minded." There wasn't much time to reminisce. The Jiang royal family's wedding ceremony was complicated, and the Qin family's people were about to arrive. Mu Hongjin and Mu Xiaolu went to the stage outside. He Yan and the others followed the servants' arrangements to rest first. At night, when the sky darkened, the lanterns in the palace lit up one by one. Near the originally empty ceremonial stage, the long steps were covered in red silk. The light of the lanterns illuminated the stage magnificently and solemnly. Around them were ceremonial officials. A couple supported each other and walked up the stage. Ian saw eldest Sir Qin. He was a young man with thick eyebrows and big eyes. Even though he was wearing a wedding robe, he still looked quite valiant. However, he would also carefully help Mu Xiaolu tidy up her overly long skirt. His gaze towards Mu Xiaolu was full of sincere love. From now on, there was another pair of lovers in the world. They would become the guardians of Jiang City, protecting the land and the people of this place. Ian couldn't help but look at Mu Hongjin, who was below the stage. The woman with deep eyebrows smiled as she looked at the young man and woman on the stage. The corners of her mouth were clearly smiling, but there were tears in her eyes. Perhaps, when she put on this wedding robe, she was filled with helplessness and anger towards fate. But now Mu Xiaolu had walked up the stage. At least at this moment, Mu Xiaolu was happy. She truly loved the man in front of her. Being able to witness the birth of happiness with her own eyes was also a happy thing. Her regrets and unwillingness in the past seemed to have been fulfilled through Mu Xiaolu in front of her. Ian quietly tightened his grip on Xiao Ju's hand. Xiao Ju raised her eyes and the corners of her lips lifted slightly. Lin Shuanghe loved crowds. He was even happier to see others get married than to see himself get married. Following the completion of the ceremony, he happily went around looking for people to drink. However, his alcohol tolerance wasn't very good. After drinking a few cups, he got drunk and complained that the heavens were unfair. He was born so handsome, yet he was still alone. It was very hateful. He Yan was speechless when he heard this. He waited until Lin Shuanghe was dead drunk and in a complete mess. When he was about to crawl under the table to find someone, he called for the servants of the Cui estate to help carry him to the carriage and send him back to the Cui estate. He Yan also drank a few cups with the people he knew. Her alcohol tolerance now was finally better than when she was in the Liang province guards. Although it couldn't compare to when she was General Fei Hong in her previous life, it wasn't to the point where she would recite a book after drinking a cup. However, He Yan didn't dare to drink too much because Xiao Yao was there. On the other hand, Xiao Ju's expression didn't change at all even after being toasted repeatedly. She really could not get drunk even after 1,000 cups. Xiao Yao was still young. When it was time, she would nod her head like a chicken pecking at rice. Ian looked outside. It was already late at night. He explained the situation to Mu Hongjin and took Xiao Yao back. Mu Hongjin liked Xiao Yao very much. She gently patted Xiao Yao's head and said, "Let's go back." Ian thought for a while and finally smiled. Young Highness and young Master Qin are now married. Your Highness, please take care of yourself. Mu Hongjin also drank a lot. Her face was a little tipsy. She couldn't help but laugh. Okay. After they left, Mu Hongjin held a cup of wine and walked to the window in the hall. Outside the window, the willow trees swayed slightly with the wind. It was as if she had returned to the spring days of many years ago. It was as if a white-clothed youth was walking towards her, step by step. The sound of the zither was clear and melodious, and the sword was elegant and unrestrained. It was as if it was yesterday. In the bustling hall, the noisy music seemed to gradually fade away. This should be a rare, beautiful dream. Mu Hongjin found a comfortable position and leaned her head against the cloth pillow on the soft couch. She slowly closed her eyes. Her white wrist was exposed under her wide sleeves. She wore a coarse silver bracelet. The edges of the bracelet were engraved with small wild daisies. Layer upon layer, it was bright and beautiful. A maidservant tiptoed closer. She saw that the woman had closed her eyes and was pretending to be asleep. She smiled as if she was having a beautiful dream. The maidservant shushed her and warned her servants. Her Highness is sleeping. Don't disturb her. She gently covered her with a thin blanket and tiptoed away. Outside, He Yan and Xiaoju walked towards the carriage. Jiang City didn't seem to have autumn or winter. It was always as long as summer. He Yan and Xiaoju walked side by side. Xiaoyao was lying on Xiaoju's shoulder. Her breathing was steady and she was sleeping soundly. She seemed to be able to faintly hear the sound of singing and laughter coming from the prince's residence. She lowered her head. Her heart was at peace like never before. Things that she once thought were luxurious and unattainable were now by her side. She didn't ask for much. She just wanted to be ordinary. In this life, she was free and unfettered. Since ancient times, everything flowed like water. Nothing could compare to this moment in front of her. She was free and unfettered. Xiaoyao smacked her lips in her sleep. Perhaps she dreamed of something delicious. He Yan looked at her for a moment and asked with a smile, Xiaoju, do you want to eat candied haws? Over. Chapter 270. Xiaoju always thought that He Yan was a liar. In other people's eyes, He Yan was righteous, forthright, confident, and generous. But in his eyes, He Yan was a person who could eat, sleep, talk nonsense, and was also a person who was greedy and stingy. Everyone had their own secrets. Although people lived in this world, they were not completely divided into good and evil. People's hearts were complicated and contradictory. But He Yan was probably the most contradictory woman he had ever met in his life. She was a pitiful person who hid in the darkness and didn't want others to discover her true heart. Compared to the brave and confident female general on the battlefield, she was just too different. It was to the extent that in the past few years, no one had ever connected He Yan with Hirufei. For example, the Fuyue army soldiers on the training field always said that their leader, General Guiyu, was more broad-minded than men, and that her conduct was more free and easy than men. She never looked back, and always strode forward. With her, the morale of the army was stable. Even if the sky fell, it would be the same thing. But Xiaoju knew that He Yan was not a person who never looked back. For the past, she had a longer attachment and affection than other people. Especially those good and precious memories. She carefully kept them and never neglected them. In Jinling City, Hua Yuxian would often ask people to send some newly brewed sweet wine to her. Every time she tasted it, she would carefully write a reply. After drinking it, she would carefully keep the wine jar away. Every season, the women in the Rundu would send her clothes and boots that they sewed themselves. The embroidery was exquisite, and the tailoring was perfect. He Yan herself had not bought any new clothes for a long time. Lin Shuanghe sometimes saw it. He secretly whispered to Xiaoju, Huaijin, if my sister he continues to be like this, will she become the next Chu Linfeng? Xiaoju gave him a get lost. In Jiang City, Cui Yuezhi would occasionally write her a letter. He would tell her about the good things that happened recently, and also about Jiuchuan. She carefully read the letters and kept them away. In the wooden drawer in the study room, the letters were neatly stacked together. She didn't want to burn them. She seemed to be free and easy, but she was especially afraid of loss. He Yan was very sad when Ermao died. Birth, old age, illness, and death were the norm in the world. Whether it was humans or animals, they would all die one day. He Yan didn't like to cry. She didn't cry when Ermao died, But Xiaoju often found her sitting on the doorstep of the courtyard, staring blankly at the bowl that Mao used to drink from. He walked over and sat with her for a while without saying anything. Yan was not as cool about loss as he appeared to be. Back then, after the Battle of Yuchuo, her comrades had died. Before that, she had forced herself not to think about those things. After returning to Shuajing, she had been sad for a long time. The only thing he could do was to stay by Yan's side. At the very least, his name would never appear on the list of lost. In these 2 years, gradually, there were many madams who secretly talked to Bai Rongwei, asking if Xiaoju had any plans to take in a concubine. Xiao family's 2 brothers were very outstanding. Xiao Jing had been married to Bai Rongwei for so many years, and even after having a daughter, Xiao Peipei, he was still deeply in love with Bai Rongwei. He really couldn't find the time. Xiaoju was different. In the past, people thought that he had a good appearance, but in reality, his personality was too cold and emotionless. They thought that he would never marry in this lifetime. However, later on, Yan married a military officer's daughter, and he doted on his wife very much. Once a cold-hearted person was enlightened and fell in love, he was far more attractive than a gentle and affectionate person. The thing that ordinary people liked to think the most was, if she can do it, why can't I? Moreover, Yan had not yet given birth to a child of the Xiao family, and he was also a military officer. He definitely didn't know how to capture a man's heart like those cute and spoiled girls. Therefore, many people thought that they had a chance. Bai Rongwei rejected one after another on behalf of Xiaoju. She couldn't stand some people who were extremely bold, overconfident, and blinded by beauty. They used all kinds of methods. Xiaoju threw people out of the door a few times. One time, he was so angry that he almost caused trouble for the other party's family. Fortunately, he was stopped by Yan. Yan smiled and said, "Everyone loves beauty. I'm not angry, so what are you angry about?" It would have been better if he didn't say this. As soon as he said this, Xiaoju became even angrier. When Lin Shuanghe came to visit, he would always say, "Who would have thought that our Xiao family's second son, young Master Huijin, would be controlled by my little sister he? You have to know," he sighed. "In the matters between men and women, the one who haggles the most loses. I originally thought that you had the upper hand. How come after a few years, you've been trampled on?" Xiaoju didn't like Lin Shuanghe's theory of haggling over every ounce. People's emotions were not like war. They had to use military tactics to attack the heart. However, he had to admit that Lin Shuanghe was right. The soldiers in the Fuyue army always thought that Yan was accommodating him and saying sweet words to him. However, in reality, he was always easily provoked by Yan, no matter if it was a big or small matter. Perhaps, using Lin Shuanghe's theory, he liked Yan more than Yan liked him. However, this was nothing. In this world, it wasn't easy to have someone like you. There were millions of people in this world. Perhaps they were fated to be together, or perhaps they weren't. People were like grains of sand in a river. They met and parted in the blink of an eye. To be able to meet the person you liked in this vast and boundless world was already considered lucky. Therefore, there was no need to pursue the matter of who liked who more. However, Yan liked to ask him about this matter. She would often interrogate him at night. "Military Governor Xiao, you actually had feelings for me in your previous life, right? If I were a man, you would definitely be a homosexual." Xiaoju scoffed. "I'm not a homosexual." Ha! This person didn't believe her at all. "The last time I went to the martial arts practice field, I heard Xinjiao and Liangjiao talking. They said that when I was in the Liangzhou Guard, before my identity as a woman was exposed, I already thought that you and I were in that kind of relationship." She looked at Xiaoju from head to toe, stroked her chin and said, "But with your looks, even if you're gay, you should be the kind that's very popular among gay men." At times like this, Xiaoju was too lazy to argue with her. Once the curtain was pulled, the battle would be revealed. It was late at night. She slept soundly. Xiaoju covered her with a blanket and rested her head on her hands. The starlight shone in from the window, illuminating a corner of the room with a faint light. He looked at the corner of the curtain. His heart was exceptionally calm. Xiaoju didn't quite understand when he had feelings for Yan. He Yan always muttered about how he had treated her differently in his previous life when he was studying at the Xianchang school. But now that he thought about it, the care he had given to He Yan at that time was probably because he saw a lot of his own shadow in this youth. The only difference was that she had a bit more naivety than him. She still had to stubbornly persist in the muddy world. A youth who wore a mask was different from other youths. Because he insisted on keeping his secret from others, he was always alone. She was clumsy, but hardworking. She was silent, but optimistic. She was weak, but she had a heart of compassion for the weak. When he was young, Xiaoju would occasionally be curious about what kind of face was under the tightly covered mask. When he was taking a nap on the tree, basking in the sun behind the rockery, and drinking tea in the bamboo forest of the Xianchang school, he would always see all kinds of Hirufei. She looked so inconspicuous, so small, but her whole body was shining. Others couldn't notice it, but he did. Xiaoju had never doubted that Hirufei would be successful in the future, if she continued to be like this. But at that time, he was only attracted to her. He didn't like her. It was like seeing a star in the night. This star wasn't very bright, but it kept shining. Once it was seen, it was hard to ignore. Their relationship as classmates wasn't fake. So after Yuhua Temple, he would even help Hirufei's sister. The first time was an accident, the second time was a coincidence, the third time was fate, and the fourth time was probably destined. Xiaoju had never doubted that he and He Yan were destined. Otherwise, why would God let her appear in front of him again and again? And his gaze was destined to be attracted by this person. He Yan seemed to have never changed. The youth who pulled the bow and practiced archery under the night sky, trying to keep up with the team's pace, was no different from the boy who secretly studied in the Xianchang school. But after she took off her mask, she finally revealed her true self. She was confident and neat. She galloped in the martial arts arena to her heart's content. She was passionate and pure like a ray of light. But she was also careful. She was used to giving and was not satisfied with being favored. She was always at a loss when it came to more intimate relationships. At first, he only thought that this person was a skilled liar. Later on, his gaze unknowingly lingered on her body more and more. His emotions were affected by her, and for the first time in his life, he tasted the taste of jealousy. He would be happy, he would be angry, he would feel injustice for her, and he would want to heal all the pain she had experienced. He Yan made him feel that in this world, there were still many things worth looking forward to. For example, Lin Shuanghe always said, "Did you know that you would have a day like this?" He didn't know that he would have a day like this. It turned out that in this world, other than bearing responsibility, misunderstanding, betrayal, and killing, there were also moments of satisfaction. What he didn't know before, He Yan brought him to know one by one. The person in front of him turned over and rolled into his arms. She subconsciously hugged him with both hands. He was slightly stunned. After pausing for a moment, a smile appeared on his lips. What did it matter who liked the other more? He was even more grateful to the heavens for giving him this bit of warmth in his cruel life. It allowed him to meet his true love and be with her forever. He Yan liked the martial arts arena very much. After the Battle of Yudo, De Wei's army rested. For at least 10 years, Yudo wouldn't have the energy to make a comeback. However, they still had to train their soldiers. She was now the leader of the Fuyue army. When she trained the soldiers, she always reminded some of the Fuyue army's veterans of General Fei Hong. She was also agile and confident, but compared to the masked woman, she was more playful and friendly. There were also some recruits who refused to believe He Yan's abilities. On the martial arts arena, the woman demonstrated the saber, horse, bow, and arrow. She was in high spirits and was as dazzling as a pearl. He Yan was born beautiful. There were countless beautiful girls in De Wei's capital, but she was probably the only one who was beautiful and had such a heroic spirit. When she put on her red warrior outfit, smiled as she pulled out the long sword at her waist. She was either giving orders to the soldiers or instructing the soldiers and horses. The young people on the field were all stunned by her brilliance. Lin Shuanghe came to see Xiaoju twice, and both times he felt the crisis for Xiaoju. He only knew that when Xiaoju was in the Liangzhou guards, she was a woman dressed as a man, and the brothers in the barracks didn't know her identity. Now she was dressed as a woman and mingled with these young men every day. These young men who were as passionate as fire almost didn't hide their love for her. Hien didn't feel it. In her eyes, these young men were no different from Wang Ba and the others in the past. They were all good men, good brothers. After the Battle of Yudo, half of the brothers in the Liang province guards left. The remaining few had been tempered by the battlefield, and were now very outstanding. Even in the Liang province guards, they were outstanding. Jiang Jiao's dojo became famous because of Jiang Jiao. Dojo Master Jiang was proud of Jiang Jiao. Most of Wang Ba's money was sent back to the bandit stronghold. The bandit stronghold he used to live in was no longer a bandit, and the fish pond he dug was quite profitable. It was said that the bandit stronghold often adopted orphans that no one wanted. Wang Ba would occasionally visit the stronghold. His temper was much better now, and even children dared to get close to him. Xiao Mai grew the fastest after Shirtu left. In the past, with Shirtu's protection, he was still a playful young man who only thought about delicious food. Now he was much more mature. His archery skills improved by leaps and bounds, and he was now even more accurate than Shirtu. He was also not as greedy as before. When he talked to Hien, he was much quieter and not as cheerful as before. Hien felt a sense of loss, but people had to grow up. Fate pushed people onto their own paths. Some people would never change, and some people would slowly grow up. Time was like the wind. It was impossible to stop them. She flipped over and dismounted from her horse. Just now, she had demonstrated that the arrow in her hand had hit the bullseye. It was beautiful and dazzling. The young man who picked up the arrow looked at her. His eyes were filled with admiration. He said half shyly and half excitedly, "General, you're amazing. You flatter me." Hien patted his shoulder and said with a smile, "You should practice more. It's the same for you." The young man looked at her, took 2 steps forward and called out, "General." Hien turned around and asked, "What's the matter?" I'm not good at archery. Can you give me some pointers?" He didn't dare to look into Hien's eyes. She had never been stingy with her soldiers' requests for pointers, so she said, "Of course I can. Try using the bow first. I'll take a look." In the distance, Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and said gloatingly, "Brother, you can even tolerate this?" Xiao Ju looked into the distance without showing any expression. "I saw that the men on the martial arts field were all scheming against Sister He. He wanted to see the world in chaos. You and I are both men. We understand men's thoughts the best. Look at that boy. On the surface, he looks like he's asking for pointers, but isn't he just taking the opportunity to get close to her? I didn't use this trick when I was in school. How can he still use this old trick? TSK, hey, why did you leave?" Hien stood behind the young soldier. Just as she was about to adjust his posture, a cold voice sounded behind her. "Wait." She turned around and saw that the young soldier was also shocked. He couldn't speak clearly. "Military Governor Xiao. Why are you here?" Hien asked. "I'm not on duty today." Xiao Ju glanced at the pale young man. Her lips curled up, and she mocked, "I'll teach him." The young soldier's face turned even uglier. Hien didn't suspect anything and only said, "Then I'll leave it to you. I'll go over there and take a look." She left with peace of mind. The young soldier looked at Hien's back and couldn't say anything. However, the man in front of him raised his eyebrows. No matter how you looked at it, his eyes were filled with unfriendliness. He said, "Go ahead and practice." Lin Shuanghe laughed heartily at the side. He silently cried tears of sympathy for the young soldier. When the sun set and the day's training ended, Hien went to the room next to the martial arts field to change his clothes. He saw the young soldier from the afternoon again. However, at this time, it was clearly late autumn. His entire body was soaked, as if he had just been fished out of the water. His lips were pale. Hien walked over and asked curiously, "What happened to you?" The young soldier stepped back and avoided her like a snake. He lowered his head and said, "It's nothing. I just practiced for too long. Thank you, General, for your understanding." Hien looked at the young soldier's back as he left in a hurry. He thoughtfully entered the room. When he entered, Xiao Ju was already inside. She took off her light armor and asked Xiao Ju while holding her own clothes, "I saw that brother outside just now. What did you do? Why is he so tired? How can it be called training if he's not tired? Xiao Ju casually drank her tea. He Yan buttoned up his collar and said, "Even so, don't be too strict. I saw that among this batch of new recruits, there are actually a few who are quite talented. You came late today so you didn't see them. There are a few young men who are quite skilled and handsome. When they practiced their spear skills in the martial arts field this morning, they were very beautiful." She seemed to be reminiscing. "Their figures are also very elegant. I think they're not bad." Xiao Ju's face was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. He slowly asked, "Very pretty?" "Yes." He Yan put on his outer robe. "It's probably because their waists are thin. When they fly, they have long legs." His eyes were almost burning with anger. He Yan. "Uft." He Yan laughed and pointed at him. "Military Governor Xiao, why are you so overbearing? Every time someone praises someone in front of you, you get so angry. You can't be so petty." She laughed heartily. Xiao Ju understood that she did it on purpose. Even so, he was still unhappy. He pursed his lips and ignored her. He Yan moved closer to him and knew that he was unhappy. She said, "It's just a joke. In my eyes, there's no difference between men and women. But Military Governor Xiao, even if you don't believe in my character, you have to believe in yourself. No matter how beautiful they are, they can't be compared to you. No matter how good their figures are, I only like your waist." At the end of her words, her tone was flirtatious. Xiao Ju looked up at her. He Yan was becoming more and more playful. He probably thought that since they were an old married couple, there was no need to put on an act. However, every time she said something unintentional or flirtatious, it would always cause ripples in his heart. He snorted and raised his eyebrows. "Wait. Wait for what?" Xiao Ju didn't answer her. He Yan understood at night. After a night of intense sex, Qing Mei asked someone to bring in hot water. She took a bath and rolled into Xiao Ju's arms. She whined, "Tell me, if I have a child in the future, will they look like you or me?" Without waiting for Xiao Ju to speak, she said to herself, "Forget it. They'll look like you. I've thought about it. No matter if it's a boy or a girl, as long as they look like you, they'll be beautiful." Xiao Ju didn't care much about appearance. Lin Shuanghe said that people didn't care about what they had. Appearance, family background, intelligence, or martial arts were all things to him. They weren't important. If they had a child in the future, Xiao Ju thought that it would be fine as long as the child was happy. He Yan had been married to him for a few years, but they didn't have a child yet. When she went to the Liang Province Guards, she trained with the new recruits every day. In order to not be discovered, she went to the Wulu River to take a cold bath in the cold weather. She also ran around to fight in Jiuquan. In the end, she hurt her body. Lin Shuanghe wrote a prescription for her, and she slowly nursed her body back to health. Xiao family's relatives, such as Cheng Li Su's mother, always asked why He Yan wasn't pregnant yet. There were even people who didn't know what was good for them who went to Bai Rongwei and hinted that since He Yan couldn't give birth, it would be better for Xiao Ju to take in a concubine first. After all, second young master Xiao couldn't be childless. Xiao Ju, who happened to pass by, said coldly in front of the person who spoke, "Do you think that just any Tom, Dick, or Harry can give birth to a Xiao family's child?" He hated this kind of scheming. Xiao Ju didn't have many fantasies about children. If he really liked children in the future, it would be because they were He Yan's child. It would have nothing to do with anything else. Who said that men had to have children? Xiao Jing married Bai Rongwei back then, but he didn't have a child for many years. So what? Xiao family's men only married and had children because they loved them. If it was for the sake of having children, they would reproduce instinctively. How different were they from beasts? If He Yan didn't have children in the future, then he wouldn't have children. He would just focus on dealing with her for the rest of his life. He Yan didn't know what he was thinking. She always had beautiful expectations for these things. Moreover, she always thought that if God was willing to give her and Xiao Ju 2 lives together, then he wouldn't be stingy with giving them the best ending. Yunxing has been a bit distracted recently. He Yan began to worry about other things. He looks so depressed. Did he get bullied outside? I've been busy training the soldiers all day, so I didn't have time to take care of him these days. Do you know what happened to him? Xiaoju was speechless for a moment. She reminded her, Song Taotao hasn't been to He residence for half a month. Song Taotao liked He Yinsheng. She almost told the entire Shuo capital that she liked him. This child's love was also direct. She was swift and decisive. When she liked him, she gave He Yinsheng things. She gave him clothes, food, housing, and transportation. She wasn't reserved at all. He Yin admired her, but she also sympathized with Song Taotao's parents. They had to worry so much. Moreover, He Yinsheng, that brat, was still so cold. But she turned to Xiaoju and said in surprise, "You mean Yinsheng likes Taotao?" Xiaoju smiled as a tacit admission. He Yin was shocked. Looking at He Yinsheng's bad temper towards the little girl, she really couldn't tell that he liked her. He Yin really couldn't tell that He Yinsheng liked Song Taotao. After all, He Yinsheng was better at hiding things than Xiaoju. It wasn't until a few days later that he came to He Yin and asked He Yin and He Sui to go to the Song family to propose marriage that He Yin realized that Xiaoju was telling the truth. "Do you really like Song Taotao?" she asked. "If you don't really like her, then don't flirt with her." "Of course I like her." He Yinsheng's voice lowered. He seemed to be a little embarrassed. He blushed and said impatiently, "Anyway, if I marry her, I will treat her well for the rest of my life." He Yin was relieved. Although He Sui didn't have an official position, He Yinsheng had a sister and brother-in-law who were generals. Although He Yinsheng was young, he was already outstanding in his career. His future was immeasurable. Moreover, Song Taotao liked him, so the Song family was happy to see this marriage. Without much effort, the marriage was settled. He Yin originally thought that He Yinsheng had offended Song Taotao. If he suddenly proposed marriage, he might be chased out by Song Taotao. He didn't expect that He Yinsheng, who usually didn't talk much, was quite good at coaxing girls. Not long after, He Yin saw Song Taotao happily go to the He family to deliver food to He Yinsheng. After the marriage was settled, the ceremony went very quickly. Other than the He family and the Song family, the happiest person was actually Cheng Li Su. He Yin sometimes thought that Cheng Li Su didn't look like He Yinsheng was marrying a wife, but more like he was marrying a wife. He often came to the He family to help. He was probably the first person in the capital to have a fiancé like this. He Yin took the opportunity to ask him, "Why are you so happy that Taotao is getting married? Are you really not unhappy at all?" "Why would I be unhappy?" Cheng Li Su smiled as if he had picked up silver. "That's true. Miss Song, now that she has been taken by Uncle He, I am free. Otherwise, I would have to worry every day that my family would pick this marriage back up again. This is called, it's better to die than to die." He was quite proud. He Yin thought about it. He was afraid that Cheng Li Su would regret it in the future and accidentally make his nephew and younger brother into enemies. He asked, "You really don't like Taotao at all?" "I don't like her." Cheng Li Su smiled and said, "Auntie, I know you and Uncle think I am unreliable, but I can still distinguish between what I like and what I don't like. Song Taotao and I are not the same kind of people. The girl I like, of course, has to be like me, able to discover the good in me. When Song Taotao saw me, she felt that I was not making progress. Trash young master, tell me, can I be her husband? Even friends need to know the occasion." He Yin saw that his words were clear and logical and thought that it was fine. Young people had their own thoughts. Since Cheng Li Su really didn't have any feelings for Song Taotao, then things had come to this point. It could be considered a kind of perfect ending. She began to help He Yinsheng with the marriage again. On the day of He Yinsheng's wedding, He Yin was very sad. He Yinsheng was the one getting married. She looked like an old mother who was sending her daughter off to get married. Tears appeared in her eyes. He Sui's father was not as emotional as He Yin. He Xining stood by He Yan's side and looked at her expression. He whispered, "Today is young master He's big day. Sister, why do you look so sad?" He Yin said, "I'm not sad. I'm overjoyed." Although she had family in her previous life, for many reasons, she couldn't get close to them. Even He Xining, who was next to her, only got close in this life after the fall of the He family. But He Yinsheng was different. From the moment she became Lady He and opened her eyes, He Sui and He Yinsheng had become her family. Although they were poor, they gave her warmth that she had never experienced before. Now, The young man in green who awkwardly ate the pastry she gave him at the back of the mountain had finally grown into a mature man. He had his own beloved girl and became an adult. When people face things that are too perfect, they often feel unreal. Sometimes Hien suspected that everything in front of her was just a long dream. She was afraid that when she woke up, everything would be empty. He Yunsheng held the bride's hand and walked into the He family's courtyard. Immediately, there were cheers all around. The He family's courtyard was crowded. She had many friends, and He Yunsheng's wedding, everyone was willing to come and join in the fun. Needless to say, Wang Ba and the others, the instructors of the Liangzhou guards, also came. By Rongwei Xiaojing. Xiaoju stood on the other side of her. Like He Yunsheng's older brother, they watched the newlyweds walk into the wedding hall. Lin Shuanghe said exaggeratedly, "Even Yunsheng is getting married. I'm still alone." Cheng Lisu patted him on the shoulder. "It's okay, Uncle Lin. I'm also alone. Let's go together." Lin Shuanghe. The newlyweds were getting married, and the wedding banquet was lively. Hien also drank a lot. In fact, other than during festivals, she was very restrained from drinking. After all, who knew if she would go and recite in front of others when she was drunk? It was fine if Xiaoju saw it, but if it was spread to other people, including the Fuyue army, who knew what kind of eyes they would use to look at her as a general in the future? They would probably think that she loved to show off. Once she was drunk, she would reveal her true colors and insist on showing off her talents. However, He Yunsheng's wedding was a big day, so she still had to drink. When Xiaoju came over, Hien was already drunk. She was sitting at the table. When she saw him, she waved at Xiaoju and shouted, "Military Governor Xiao." Xiaoju helped her up and said to He Sui, "Yen is drunk. I'll send her back first." Go. He Sui also said, "It's getting late. You should go back. Come back tomorrow morning when you're free to drink Tao Tao's tea." Xiaoju nodded and helped Hien out of the hall. She reminded her, "There are stairs. Be careful." Hien turned her head and hugged his waist. She refused to leave. Xiaoju took a deep breath and looked at the person in front of her. "Lady He, let's go home. Military Governor Xiao." She looked up at him. From her appearance, it was hard to tell that she was drunk. She said, "Let me tell you a secret." "Tell me." Behind him in the wedding hall, the joyous laughter of the musical instruments gradually faded away. The night wind was cold and cheerless. He pulled Hien's outer garment a little tighter. He saw Hien point at the moon on the roof and say, "I like the moon." He was suddenly stunned. At some point in his memory, she had said the same thing to him. At that time he had not completely fallen in love with Hien, but his heart was inevitably moved. She whispered in his ear, and he took it as a casual joke. He did not know how much sincerity was hidden in that joke. If she was destined to hide in the dark, where the moon could not shine, she would just stand far away and hide the secret in her heart. The woman in front of him gave him a big smile. Her eyes were as bright as the stars. She reached out and hugged his neck. She whispered in his ear, "I'll tell you another secret." She stood on tiptoe and gently kissed him on the lips. "The moon is yours." In an instant, the moon was as beautiful as a painting. The world's fireworks and all kinds of emotions could not compare to this moment of eternity. The moon was lonely and cold. The moon hung in the sky. Until one day he saw a traveler stumbling along the endless dark road. He casually sprinkled a ray of light to illuminate the road in front of the traveler. At that moment, he saw a beautiful world with a warm sun and rosy clouds. Hien seemed to be extremely tired. Leaning in his arms, she closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. He stared blankly for a moment, then lowered his head and planted a sincere kiss on her forehead. Carrying her horizontally, he walked out of the room. The autumn night was long. The grass in the courtyard was luxuriant. Moths flew to the candles. The wind sighed. The man walked out step by step. The corners of his lips were curved. It was full of youthful joy. She did not know that the moon also had its own secret. She was the moon's worry. She was the moon's lover. She was the beginning of his heart, and also the end of his love. This was the moon's secret. Chapter 271. The first time Xia Qingxiu met Yin, he was at the spring banquet with his cousin. Although it was called a spring banquet, It was actually just an opportunity for the noble young masters and young ladies of the right age to see each other. At that time, Xia Qingxiu was only 16 years old. Although there were young ladies of this age in the capital who were already married, Xia Qingxiu doted on his daughter and did not intend to marry Xia Qingxiu off so early. Therefore, Xia Qingxiu only came out to have fun with his cousin. It was the spring of April, and the grass was long and the orioles were flying. The tender grass by the Sishui River was furry. Xia Qingxiu followed his cousin Xia Qianqian out of the carriage. There were already young ladies he knew who were flying kites. Seeing this, Xia Qianqian immediately asked the maidservant to take out the prepared kites and walk towards her friend. Xia Qianqian was 18 years old this year. Among the group of young ladies, her appearance was especially outstanding. She was exceptionally sweet and beautiful. She also understood the strength of her appearance very well. She wore a scarlet tulle-embroidered narrow-collared dress that outlined her slim figure. In the crowd, she could be seen at a glance. Her family background was also the most superior among this group of young ladies. In just a moment, she was surrounded by people and praised. At that time, Xia Qingxiu was still a 16-year-old girl. At most, she could only be considered delicate and pretty, not to mention compared to her cousin Xia Qianqian. Xia Qingxiu was usually called a bookworm, and Xia Qingxiu was secretly called a little bookworm. She scrupulously followed etiquette. Among her peers or sisters, she seemed a little dull and taciturn, which was not likable enough. The relationship between Xia Qianqian and Xia Qingxiu could not be considered close. They were just ordinary cousins. However, with Xia Qingxiu, this dull and boring bookworm, by her side, it made Xia Qianqian look delicate, light and intelligent. Xia Qingxiu did not think much of it. Seeing that his cousin and her friend were talking animatedly, he picked up a book and sat at the side to read. Xia Qianqian couldn't be bothered with her. After a while, everyone began to set up a long table beside the Sishui shoreline. On the long table were the snacks that the young ladies had brought out from the residence. They could eat here at noon. After an unknown period of time, Xia Qingxiu heard the young ladies beside him talking about which brand's new rouge color was beautiful. Now they were talking about, young Master Yan will also come today. The young master of the Yan family referred to the current young master of the left and right vanguard's commander's residence, Yan Nongguang. He was only 18 years old this year. It was said that he was brave and good at fighting, and was born with a talent of striking appearance. At such a young age, his future was limitless. Xia Qianqian's father intended to marry into the Yan family. Today's outing was also a tacit understanding with the old master and madam of the Yan family. It was to see if there was any fate between the two juniors. Xia Qingxiu had also heard about this, but this was her cousin's business. She came out today to serve as a foil to her cousin, basking in the sun and reading a book. Just as she was thinking, someone beside her suddenly shouted softly, "They're here." Xia Qingxiu looked up and saw a group of youths approaching from afar on the bank of the Sishui shoreline. The leading youth was wearing a silver robe. This color was really too eye-catching, but he was handsome and tall, so he didn't find it strange. His hair was tied into a high ponytail, and his eyebrows were unruly. He seemed to be a little irritated and impatient, but it made him stand out among the group of youths. Everyone said that there were 3 beauties in the Shuo capital. Young Master Xiao was like the spring breeze, second young Master Xiao was like the autumn water, and fourth young Master Chu was like an orchid. This youth was like a silver spear. It was a little exaggerated, overly gorgeous, but with a straightforward impulse. The handsome youth who walked out of the spring day was always exceptionally beautiful. Even though Xia Qingxiu wasn't very interested in these things, he couldn't help but take a few more glances at him. He thought to himself that with this person's appearance, he should be considered the 4th most beautiful person. Just as he was thinking, the young lady sitting beside Xia Qianqian pushed Xia Qianqian and said in a low voice, "Qianqian, this is young Master Yan. He looks really compatible with you." Xia Qianqian blushed inexplicably. Before she came, although she had heard of Yan He's name, she had never seen him in person. She didn't know what he looked like. Today, when she saw him, she realized that he was so handsome. For a moment, she was a little moved. The group of youths didn't approach. From afar, a few youths were laughing and laughing. They began to take out the prepared kites, and began to play with the east wind. In the sky of Sishui disease, there were many kites, sand swallows, magpies, 2 dragons playing with a pearl. The silver-robed youth was surrounded and pushed by people. Finally, he impatiently followed the order to bring a black King Kong, and held it in his hand. The black King Kong flew very quickly. This youth was very good at releasing kites. The young ladies watched from afar, and couldn't help but secretly cheer. However, they couldn't tell whether it was the kite that flew the highest or the youth who released the kite that was cheering for him. Xia Qianqian looked at it, and suddenly stood up. She smiled and said, "Let's go release it too." In fact, before this, the young ladies had already released kites for a while. However, these young ladies from rich families were physically weak. After releasing them for a while, they had to sit down and rest. The rest was left to the servants. Xia Qianqian stood up and walked to the maid who was placing her 100 butterfly painting. She said, "Let me do it." The young ladies sitting at the long table immediately laughed. Someone whispered, "Looks like Qianqian likes it." Xia Qingxiu was a little puzzled when she heard that, but she didn't say anything. She wasn't a talkative person to begin with. She only saw Xia Qianqian pulling the kite string and walking towards the river. Then she saw that the 2 kites in the sky were getting closer and closer. She hesitated whether she should open her mouth to remind her. In the next moment, she heard her cousin exclaim, "Aya!" The string of the 100 butterfly painting and the black King Kong were entangled together. They collided into a ball and fell towards the forest. The noble ladies beside her laughed even louder. They discussed in low voices, "Qianqian, good method." Xia Qianqian was still holding the kite string in her hand. Her expression was flustered, but there was a smug joy in her eyes. She was very confident in her appearance. If she wanted to capture the heart of a youth, it shouldn't be a difficult task. Her rouge today was very beautiful, and her dress was also very beautiful. She turned around and glanced at the silver-robed youth who was frowning as he stared at the entangled kite. She turned around and ran into the forest where the kite fell. At the same time, Xia Qingxiu, who was sitting at the side, put down the book in her hand and stood up. The noble lady beside her asked, "Miss Qingxiu, what are you doing?" "Sister's kite fell. I'm going to help," Xia Qingxiu replied. "Why are you helping?" The noble lady who spoke covered her mouth and laughed. She looked at her as if she was looking at a fool, and there was a complicated sourness in her eyes. "Qianqian doesn't need your help now." Xia Qingxiu pursed her lips. In the end, she was worried about Xia Qianqian being alone, so she lifted her skirt and ran over. The noble ladies called her a few times, but when they saw that she ignored them, they let it go. The forest where the kite fell was not far from the river, but there were bushes growing inside. When a girl walked inside, she had to be careful of the thorny branches and leaves cutting the corner of her skirt. Xia Qingxiu struggled to push aside the bushes, and saw a corner of his cousin's scarlet dress not far away. His heart relaxed and he was about to walk over when he suddenly heard Xia Qianqian say, "Young Master Yan." Xia Qingxiu paused. Only then did he see someone standing in front of Xia Qianqian. It was the main character of today's meeting, young Master Yan. Xia Qianqian's voice was gentle and sweet, with a hint of panic and apology. "Young Master Yan, I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose." He just frowned at her. His gaze was bright and sharp, making Xia Qianqian feel a little guilty for no reason. Xia Qianqian grabbed the corner of her clothes uneasily. "Young Master Yan, the kites are all entangled together now. What should we do?" Xia Qianqian's eyes were shy and her voice was sweet. Xia Qingxiu finally understood that his cousin was probably seducing this young Master Yan. However, it was too late for her to leave now. She was afraid of alarming the 2 people in front of her, so she was forced to watch the next scene. At the same time, she thought that this young Master Yan would probably say things like, "It's okay and it's none of your business." Then he would comfort her softly and send Xia Qianqian home. After that, this marriage would be settled. That should be it, right? "It's okay." Just as he thought of this, the youth's voice came from the front. Xia Qingxiu thought in his heart that it was indeed so. Raising his head, he saw Yan He suddenly smile without a care in the world. He casually pulled out a small knife from his waist and cleanly cut off the threads between the two kites. Xia Qingxiu was dumbfounded. She was not the only one who was shocked. Xia Qianqian was stunned for a moment before asking, "What are you doing?" "So we're separated." Yanhe put away the knife. "Don't worry, I'm a broad-minded person. I won't hold it against you for deliberately breaking my kite." Xia Qianqian had always been flattered by others since she was young. No one had ever spoken to her like this. For a moment, a sense of shame surged into her heart. She cried out, "Who deliberately broke your kite?" She slapped Yanhe, lifted her skirt, and ran away crying. Xia Qingxiu was so scared that she did not dare to breathe loudly. She thought to herself that this young master Yin was really unexpected. "Hey," someone said in an annoyed voice. "The one who's peeping over there, have you seen enough?" Xia Qingxiu was stunned. Had she been discovered? The next moment, that person had already walked in front of her. Xia Qingxiu subconsciously took a step back. Looking closer, this young man called Yin he was indeed very handsome, but when he looked at people he always had a condescending look. When Yin he saw Xia Qingxiu, he was also stunned. He frowned and said, "It's you." Among the noble ladies at the long table, he had seen Xia Qingxiu a long time ago. She did not chat and laugh with those noble ladies, nor did she fly kites. She just sat beside Xia Qianqian and read, like a decoration. "That person just now," he asked. "Who is she to you?" Xia Qingxiu said, "Cousin." Yin he snorted and said in disgust, "Pretentious." He pushed Xia Qingxiu away and walked forward. Xia Qingxiu did not expect Yin he to suddenly push her. She was a young lady who could not lift or carry anything. Yin he was a martial arts practitioner. After being pushed like this, he took a few steps back. His hand accidentally brushed against a thorny branch, and in an instant, a red mark appeared on the back of his hand. Such a red mark on his fair skin looked very dazzling. Yin he was also stunned. He did not expect these delicate young ladies to be so fragile. They could get hurt just by touching them. He was a little annoyed, but he could not sit back and do nothing. He took a step forward to check on her injury, but he did not expect Xia Qingxiu to immediately take a step back. "You're injured," Yin he said. "I know." Xia Qingxiu's expression was calm, as if she did not care about the wound on the back of her hand. Her tone was calm. But men and women should not touch each other. Yin he was a little puzzled. The girl in front of him was far less beautiful than Xia Qianqian. The dress she was wearing was light yellow, and she did not wear any makeup. She looked like she was still at the age where she did not know about love. How could it be not touching each other? He said, "This little girl is young but she's quite old-fashioned." Xia Qingxiu just turned sideways to avoid him. "I'm broad-minded. I won't argue with young Master Yin about the fact that you deliberately pushed me." Yin he was stunned. After Xia Qingxiu said this, he turned around and left. Yin he touched his chin. This guy was avenging her cousin. This was the first time he was scolded by a woman like this. She looked gentle and refined, and it seemed that she was not a person who would suffer losses. After Xia Qingxiu left the forest, the noble ladies at the long banquet had already dispersed in twos and threes. Xia Qianqian was probably unhappy with Yin he, so she cried and took the carriage to go back. Xia Qingxiu also had to hurriedly follow. As a result, when Yin he came out, the group of noble ladies had already boarded the carriage. There was a book lying in the grass beside the long banquet. Yin he remembered that when he came, only Xia Qingxiu was sitting here reading a book. This book was probably hers, but she left in a hurry and forgot about it. He bent down and picked it up. He opened it and saw that it was a travel book. There was also someone's note on it. The handwriting was extremely beautiful and elegant. It reminded him of the girl who quietly scolded him in the forest just now. Yin he pursed his lips and said in a low voice, "Bookworm." However, for some reason he put the travel book into his arms. This meeting with Xia Qianqian naturally ended without any results. Xia Qianqian's parents even treated Commander Yin coldly for a period of time. Commander Yin turned around and scolded Yin he, but Yin he himself did not think much of it. However, this marriage did not continue. Time passed quickly, and another year passed. Xia Qingxiu was 17 years old. Lord Xia was thinking that he should start looking for suitable young talents in Shuo capital for Xia Qingxiu. When Yan He returned to the residence, he heard his mother discussing with his aunt about matchmaking his cousin to Xia Qingxiu. Xia Qingxiu. Yan He stopped walking into the house and turned his head to ask, "Is it the young lady of the Imperial College's Chancellor's residence?" "How do you know?" Mother Yan asked in confusion. "Don't you hate to remember the names of these young ladies?" Yan He did not answer his mother's question. He only frowned and asked, "Cousin is 2 years older than me. Miss Xia is still young, right? In terms of age, am I not more suitable?" Commander Yan scolded him. "Miss Xia is from a scholarly family and is knowledgeable. Didn't you say that you hate people who play with words the most? Don't you hate bookworms the most? Are you willing to matchmake you?" Yan He did not say anything. He returned to his room and stared at the pond outside the window for half a day. He took out a book from the bottom of the desk drawer. It was a travel book. In the middle of the night, when the dogs in the Yan residence were asleep, Yan He put on his outer clothes and knocked on the door of his parents' bedroom. "Yan Nangguang, you scared people to death in the middle of the night. What do you want?" Commander Yan was furious. Yan He said, "I'm willing." After that, it was a long day of chasing. Yan He tried his best to please the beauty. Master Xia was very fierce and old-fashioned. Every time Yan He saw him, he was a little scared. Xia Qingxiu was even scarier than Master Xia. He was clearly a bookworm who did not have the strength to truss a chicken. However, every time he looked at him with his calm eyes, Yan He did not know what to do. Commander Yan scolded him at home. "You're usually like a gamecock. Why don't you know how to chase a girl properly? Why doesn't she like you? Can't you think about it?" Yan He could not think of it. He felt that he was quite good. He was handsome, agile, and had a good family background. He was one of the top young talents in the Shuo capital. Why didn't Xia Qingxiu like him? It must be because that bookworm did not know how to appreciate men. He was blind. However, he did not dare to say this in front of Xia Qingxiu. Seeing that her son had a lot on his mind, Madame Yan felt gratified and helpless. She could only beat around the bush. "Since you like her, you should treat her better. Take care of her more. Eventually Miss Xia will see the good in you." Yan He felt that his mother's words made sense. However, he did not know how to treat someone well. The jewelry and clothes he gave were all returned. The love poem he wrote was returned to his servant the next day. Sometimes he felt annoyed. When he first met Xia Qingxiu, he should not have been so rude and frivolous. It would have been better than trying his best to remedy the situation. But he still felt that the results were not good. As a proud son of heaven, he finally felt the anxiety of love and could not sleep. And no matter how he treated Xia Qingxiu, this girl had treated him neither coldly nor warmly from beginning to end. Therefore, when he asked Commander Yan to propose marriage to Xia Qingxiu, Yan He went with a feeling of failure. However, he was about to lead the army into battle. Life and death were unpredictable on the battlefield. If he did not propose marriage, he was afraid that he would not have another chance. It was better to be disappointed after trying than to be disappointed before trying. That was what he thought. However, he did not expect that Lord Xia would agree to the marriage proposal from Yan family. He could not believe it. This was supposed to be a happy event. However, when it came to the end, Yan He shrank back. If he died, wouldn't Xia Qingxiu bear the infamy of being a jinx to her husband? He walked out of Xia Qingxiu's house with a heavy heart. When he was about to leave, someone called him from behind. "Young Master Yan." Yan He turned around and saw Xia Qingxiu standing behind him, looking at him quietly. Yan He was at a loss for words. "Young Master Yan." This quiet girl smiled at him for the first time. She was gentle and sweet, like the spring willows by the Sishui River, full of warmth. "Come back early," she said. He stared blankly for a moment, then inexplicably blushed. Under the sunlight, he stared straight at this girl. He stared until the servant girl beside Xia Qingxiu took out a broom and prepared to chase him away. Only then did he cough lightly and say in a small voice, "I will." After taking 2 steps, he turned around and added nonchalantly, "Wait for me." Chapter 272. Every time Yan He went to war, Xia Qingxiu would be waiting for him in the mansion. From 1 person to 2 people waiting, what they got in the end was bad news. In the first year after Yan He left, everyone thought that Xia Qingxiu would wash her face with tears and be sad all day long. However, what she showed was a shocking calmness. Wuxia was well taken care of by her. Lin Shuanghe often came to visit. Xia Qingxiu would still smile and do what she was doing in an orderly manner. Sometimes, when she woke up in the middle of the night, she would subconsciously try to touch the person beside her. It was only when her hand touched the cold mattress that she seemed to realize that the person who had warmed her was no longer there. Eventually, she would slowly fall silent. In the 5th year after Yan He left, Commander Yan and Madame Yan took the initiative to persuade Xia Qingxiu to remarry. Xia Qingxiu was not old. It was not like there were no widows who remarried in the capital. She was gentle, and she was also the daughter of Lord Xia. She might have a good family. However, Xia Qingxiu politely declined. Xia Qingxiu said, "I have Wuxia. That is enough." A new singing jade hall was opened in the capital. Xia Qingxiu often went to help. She arranged her life to the fullest and calmly continued her life without Yan He. Yan often came to talk to her. Xia Qingxiu knew that she was worried about him. However, ever since she was young, she had a personality that did not make people worry. Just like the first time Yan He saw her, she would never let herself be taken advantage of. 10 years after Yan He left, Wuxia already had the appearance of a young man. His facial features were similar to Yan He's, but he was more delicate than Yan He. His spear skills were already very good. Yan and Xiaoju would come to teach him swordsmanship when they were free. He often provoked Xiaoju. With a high ponytail and a silver spear in his hand, he said, "Military Governor Xiao, in a few years, you will be defeated by me." Of course, he ended up being thrown onto a tree by Xiaoju. However, even though he couldn't beat Xiaoju, he was able to use the competition as an excuse to get back at Xiaoyao. As the saying goes, a father's debt must be paid by a daughter. In the 15th year after Yan He left, Wuxia found a girl he liked. The young man was staring blankly at the thing in his hand. When he saw his mother come in, he hurriedly hid the sachet that his sweetheart had given him. Xia Qingxiu smiled and sat down beside him. "You like this girl very much?" she asked. Yan Wuxia subconsciously retorted, "Who likes her?" His ears quietly turned red. Xia Qingxiu patted his head and said, "Then remember to treat her better." The young man pretended to be calm and looked away. With a red face, he said without much confidence, "Humph." In the 20th year after Yan He left, Yan Wuxia married the daughter of the Minister of Revenue. It was the girl that he liked when he was 15. They gave birth to a daughter named Niao Niao. Yan Wuxia treated Niao Niao and her mother very well. In the past, there was a rumor in the capital that Guide Zhonglang, Yan Nongguang, was a henpecked husband. Now that she saw how Yan Wuxia treated his wife and daughter, she realized that he had inherited his father's business. Niao Niao looked like her mother and was closest to her grandmother, Xia Qingxiu. Her personality was not as arrogant as Yan Wuxia's, nor was she as lively as her mother's. Everyone said that she was very similar to Xia Qingxiu in the past. She was gentle, quiet, soft, and strong. In the 25th year after Yan He left, Niao Niao, who was 5 years old, was playing in the fu when she found a cloth bag under her grandfather's old bed. Yan He's study room had not been touched in all these years. It maintained its original appearance. Xia Qingxiu personally cleaned it every day for more than 20 years. Niao Niao slipped in when she was not paying attention. Niao Niao was small, so she went to the innermost part of the study room and found a treasure wrapped in a red cloth. Niao Niao thought about it and handed the cloth bag to Xia Qingxiu as if it was a treasure. After so many years, Xia Qingxiu's hand that was holding the red cloth trembled when she saw what Yan He had left behind. She opened the cloth bag. Sunlight came in through the window and made her squint her eyes. After so many years, she was old and her eyes were not as clear as before. She looked at it for a while before she could see clearly that it was a book with the words, "Happy Travels" written on it. The book had been stored for a long time. The pages were all yellowed. Because it was kept in the dark all day long, there was a sense of decay. Niao Niao had already been attracted by the larks outside the courtyard and ran out. Xia Qingxiu's gaze fell on the page for a long time. She finally remembered a certain spring day when she followed her cousin to the Sishui shoreline to enjoy the flowers, and the book was left behind. At that time, she was only 16 years old, the best years of her life. It was at that time in the spring, the kites by the Sishui shoreline were entangled. The young man cut off the love of the girl opposite him with a knife. He was decisive like an emotionless villain. He turned around and picked up the book she had left behind and treasured it for so many years. She slowly flipped open the book and was stunned. Unknowingly, a line of small words had been secretly written on the title page of the book. The flowers are deep, the willows are dark. Passing through the willows and flowers, I search for the message. The husband betrays the wife. The handwriting was firm and frivolous. It was obvious that it was written by a man. She was not unfamiliar with it. It was Yanhee's handwriting. Time passed quickly. In an instant, she seemed to be able to travel through many years. She saw the frivolous young man in a silver robe with a ponytail sitting in front of the table. He was biting the pen in agitation. He was almost gnashing his teeth as he wrote such a poem full of grievances and complaints on the title page. It was like a resentful woman scolding a heartless man whose heart was as hard as iron. Who would have thought that Yanhee would do such a thing? Xia Qingxiu was stunned for a moment. Then she laughed. The sunlight gently fell on her hair, blurring her white hair. Her smile was like a flower. She was like a 16-year-old girl who was moved for the first time. It was sweet and happy. That night she saw Yanhee. He was wearing a new silver robe like many years ago. He stood in front of her with an arrogant attitude. She was wearing a light yellow dress. Niao Niao stood in front of him and asked calmly, "Why did you take my book?" The young man's arrogant expression quickly changed. He panicked. However, he tried his best to maintain his composure. He coughed lightly and said, "I picked it up. It's mine. You even scribbled on it." She gently pointed out his bad behavior. Yanhee's face turned even redder. He defended himself. "That's not scribbling. If it's not scribbling, then what is it?" "It's..." He fidgeted with his ponytail. His tone was a little fierce. However, there was a hint of grievance at the end of his words. "It's what you think it means." Xia Qingxiu stared at him without saying a word. He was like a paper tiger. He asked, Why are you looking at me?" Xia Qingxiu couldn't help but laugh. Yanhee looked at her, not knowing what to do. After a while, he seemed to be touched by Xia Qingxiu's laughter and laughed as well. He hesitantly reached out his hand, wanting to hold Xia Qingxiu's hand. "Pa!" The wind blew the window loudly. Xia Qingxiu opened her eyes. Yanhee wasn't there. The mattress beside her was empty. She looked at the canopy silently for a while. Then she slowly sat up and got off the bed barefoot. It was late at night. The floor was cold. It was the 25th spring day after Yanhee left. She woke up from her dream. She was so sad that she couldn't sleep. She slowly sat on the floor and buried her head in her knees. It was the first time in so many years that she cried silently. Time passed slowly. A day was also long. However, it passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, a lifetime had passed. On the 30th year after Yanhee left, Xia Qingxiu passed away due to illness. Her children and grandchildren stayed by her side. This woman was quiet and gentle all her life. She was always calm and gentle. Before she died, she only handed a book to Wuxia and asked him to bury her with Yanhee. When the coffin was buried, it was a sunny day. The kites by the Sishui River were all over the sky, and the peonies were in full bloom. It was like a day many years ago when he walked over from the long embankment full of new willows and bent down to pick up the travel notes. But inadvertently, he left behind the joyful thoughts of a young man.